Kenshi Critiques number Kenshi Dick Rides your favorite anime. This is going to be a special video. I was thinking, should I do this live or should I have this pre-recorded and edit it down a little bit? And I thought, you know what, this is going to be one of those legacy videos. And I've been thinking, everyone does like their top favorite games of all time, like a top 10 or top 20. But I thought I'd do a top 50 essential games of all time. Games I think that you have to play, that I feel are so important that you have to play them. So I want to just briefly show you guys footage, trailers, as much as I can, and just talk over why I think they're so important, not only to gaming but to me as well personally. But if I don't really have an action for it, you might not see it in there, right, in the list. So as much as I want to say Tetris, everyone's fucking played Tetris, it's ubiquitous at this point. So I don't really need to say it so it has to mean something to me. But I thought not necessarily all the games in this 50 are going to be games I consider the best of all time. But I would have played them and I would have recognize that they're just so important that you have to at least have played them. So this is not going to be a ranking from, you know, number 50 to number 1. It's just the 50 essential games of all time that I feel you guys should play, you know. So it could be a mix of loads of stuff in there. There's even stuff, Nintendo stuff in there that I don't really have a huge affection for, but it was such a big part of my formative years getting into gaming that I thought I'd do it. So the first game on this list is Vagrant Story. So, Vagrant Story, what can I say about this one? Even by today's Zoomer standards, this is a pretty obscure game. Many of you guys would have heard of Final Fantasy Tactics, if only for the Final Fantasy Tactics name. A lot of you guys would have played FF12, because it's a cool Final Fantasy game. But Vagrant Story was stuck somewhere in the middle, because what this was it was called the Ivalice Alliance, which was a project Square Enix made to have a world or series of games away from the Final Fantasy universe, set in its own distinct universe called Ivalice, and they were going to have an anthology of games that were going to take place, this era, that area, different geographical locations within the same world, right? But only loosely connected. So Final Fantasy Tactics was one of them. Final Fantasy 12 became one of them. But Vagrant Story was a late-gen PlayStation 1 game, and it was so fucking unique, and I've not played a game like it since. And I remember finishing it just before I went to uni, and it was a difficult game at the time. So what the game is, you play as one character, Ashley Riot. So it's more like a single-player-focused role-playing game, dungeon crawler. It's not an RPG in the sense that we know them, a party-based system with a big open world and that kind of thing. It's fairly linear and it's got a mission-based structure. So the basic setup of the story is Ashley Riot is part of a militant wing of the church that hunts down heretics on their orders, people who are against the prevailing religion and that kind of thing. So their eyes are set on this heretical cult leader called Sydney, and Sydney's in cahoots with the government, particularly this Duke, and people are wondering what's going on with this Duke. And he comes on their radar because he takes the Duke's family hostage because he's trying to look for some dark magic, some dark secret beneath the Duke's mansion estate. So they send Ashley Riot in to bump him off, assassinate him. And the great thing about this game is it's a very linear game. Sections take about 10 minutes at most, and they grade you. You get a random like a dice roll where you get like stat upgrades, that sort of thing. But the best thing about this game is how fucking dark and grimy and gritty it is. It's not edgy like you get fucking anime looking, you know, role-playing games nowadays. When they localized it into a Shakespearean style of English, and you had to read into it a little bit to figure out what's going on, and it gave this world a fucking flavor. The unique thing about this game is its combat systems and its the way they intertwined, and the amount of agency it provided this character in exchange for not having party members with different abilities, different things. So this character, one character learns magics, can equip anything, different abilities. You could target specific body parts. So like if someone was really fast, if a fucking enemy was really fast running around all over the place, you hit their legs to slow them down. If there's a enemy that's casting magic and it's pissing you off, you hit their head so they stop casting magic. If they're hitting you with a weapon really quickly, their agility is high, right? Hit them in the arm so that they don't do it. So there's really unique elements. The biggest element of this was the weapon crafting. So you know, you could there was no there was no requirements to equip certain weapons, but if you didn't like having a pole arm, right, for like a pole weapon, a two-handed weapon, but you saw it had stats that were good against dragons and it was imbued with light or fire or magic, you thought, man, I wish this sword I have over here like using had that. You break down that pole arm, that two-handed weapon, and you can use its pieces and they can be inherited by the sword. So that was what the crafting system was. Sometimes you would mix and match and dismantle and join stuff and create brand new weapons with stat bonuses, and you could rename every weapon in the game. You could name your weapon so you remembered what this specific weapon I made was. This is the dragon killer because it's got a dragon power with light in it and all that kind of shit. So it gave you so much agency and so much ownership over this one character. This game, there hasn't been a game like this since, and it's risky to do because it wasn't easy, man. They didn't hold your hand. It was a very difficult game at the time. It took me a couple of years to on and off to finish this game because it was difficult to grasp its deep systems, you know, especially for, you didn't expect it of a PlayStation 1 game. We were used to the big cinematic stuff, late gen, you know, the Final Fantasy 9s, we were used to the Metal Gear Solids and that kind of thing. So this game is a must play. It holds up by today's standards. If they gave it the HD remaster treatment, if they gave it voice acting, and they added some modern accoutrements like camera control, better camera controls, this game could be a 9 out of 10 again. This is a must play game. It's stuck in Square Enix's history, and they haven't really done anything. It recently got Saga Frontier remastered, which came out the same year FF7 did. This was a late gen PS1 game. This game you could almost convince people with a remaster that this was more like a PS2 game easily. And it had great music by the Final Fantasy XII composer, great writing. A lot of creatives worked on this, man. So I thoroughly recommend you guys check this out. It's available on PlayStation 1 classics on PS3, or you can just get play a ROM on PlayStation 1 emulator. So what you're seeing here is actually footage that somebody did remaking Mario 64, because I've heard Nintendo's a questionable reputation of people using gameplay or footage, so just to be safe, I thought I'd do this. But this is actually a big testament to the fact that if Mario 64 came out today, how it would slot neatly into Nintendo's stable of Mario games, the 3D Mario games. This was the new bar they set, and it's 100% an essential Mario game. Not many franchises fare well when they transition to 3D. Castlevania certainly didn't transition well to 3D. Contra didn't transition to 3D. Sonic didn't transition to 3D. And this was at a time where Nintendo were playing catch up with Sony, because Sony trounced them when they came into the 32-bit era, right? So everything had to be 3D. They tried a Castlevania on 64, I think. There was a Doom 64 apparently that came out or didn't come out and only came out recently or something, or re-released. And they were desperate to get all the stuff that was popular on their SNES, right? The Dooms, the Marios, the freaking Castlevanias into 3D, and some of them worked, some of them didn't. What worked and what's held up has been the Mario franchise. So I feel like what's great with Mario is that it was probably the one big evolution, which all franchises get at some point, right? from shifting from the 2D side-scroller perspective to 3D, but it was successful in recapturing that feeling of replayability and exploration, but also it enhanced Mario's moveset like we'd never seen before. It wasn't just double jumping and the items. They had to give Mario a new ways to maneuver, new techniques, and we all remember the stages, we all remember the music, we all remember the secrets, we all remember the glitches and the shortcuts for this game. And that's how we remember it, right? And I feel like the replay became from the stars, collecting all the stars in each level, finding the secret routes, unlocking areas of the castle, meeting the requirements. It recaptured all the great things from the 2D era of Mario, and then it cranked it up to 10. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't just content to shift the perspective. They wanted to make sure that everything, all the gameplay loop, the gameplay cycle you went through in the original games, Super Mario Lands, Super Mario Worlds, all that stuff, Super Mario All-Stars, they were able to cram that into a 3D perspective. And this game deserves credit for now giving us Mario Odysseys, the Mario 3D lands, the Mario Galaxies. They were able to use this as a base to basically make a whole bunch of tangential Mario projects which now stand on their own. Mario Odyssey is its own thing, Galaxy is its own thing, the Mario 3D land is its own thing, the more 2.5D Marios are its own thing, and it's all thanks to this. And you can see the DNA of this, and you can see how this is now a base for pretty much all the Mario games they release now. They've always remained traditional. You know, this game, even for its time, in terms of maneuverability, density, exploration, variety in the levels, it still holds up compared to their old Marios, you know, some of the late 2D Mario games. And it was this is why some games remain more nostalgic. We're more nostalgic about some games than others. It's because they were such a joy to play, and it was like a whole new world had been created. And not every franchise gets that when shifted 3D. It wasn't just the novelty of, oh yeah, well, now in 3D, the whole now in 3D thing, right? Not everything bears well when that happens. But for Mario, it was a complete game changer. It never looked back. I don't think they ever went back to making 2D Marios. They did 2.5D, 3D conversions or remakes of the old Marios, but they were still fundamentally the same thing. But they never looked back from this, basically the base, which was the Mario 64. So go check it out, man, and I hope they remake it. But I feel like because now we're telling people that you're not gated behind a console, that if you buy a game today, you can play it in perpetuity. You can play it on the future consoles, and they know that, so they'll be like, shit, we can only sell it once, and then we can't make money off it again. So they're remastering it now. They could have remade it, because they certainly aren't averse to remaking their games. But I hope they pick their moment and they really do like remake it like this, and it will look pretty sweet on that Switch OLED, man. That new Switch OLED, the handheld they're releasing. So go check it out, man.
We've heard there were almost no survivors after the meteor crashed on the Highlands, and yet you appeared to be unharmed. How did you survive?
I don't know. What is the cost of my immortality? Lifetimes of battle. Lifetimes of bloodshed. Lifetimes of pain. I've survived here for 1,000 years, but I can recall none of it. As a mysterious magic power infects the soil of the world, the past must be revealed. Lost Odyssey.
So yeah, this is Lost Odyssey. Man, it's essential. I'm gonna say this now. It's essential, if only for the fact that many of you guys have not played it because it was stuck behind Xbox 360 hardware. And right now, the only way you can play it is through backwards compatibility on Xbox One or on the original Xbox 360. So now this game is a JRPG from Mistwalker Studios. It's loosely based on a Japanese author called Kiyoshi Shigematsu. His novel or his series of short stories called 1,000 Years of Dreams, which are about the story of Kaim, an immortal who's lived for like 1,000+ years, and he's reminiscing about his interactions with various people. He's had grandchildren who he's outlived, meetings he's had. It's a beautifully told series of short stories, and what they do is they take these short stories and pepper them throughout the game, Lost Odyssey, and it forms the backstory of the protagonist, Kaim Argonaut, who's an immortal. And the game's about him, reconciling with his memories, meeting up with other immortals, figuring out what their place is in this world, where they came from. It's very bittersweet, a lot of melancholy in it, but the writing is beautiful. And it's not just text. Whenever you trigger these flashbacks, these short stories in the game, it's not just text. It's very lavishly produced. It's got sound effects, music, subtle animations when you're triggering them. But the JRPG is traditional in every sense of the word, but it also does new stuff. And the reason it's essential is you will never get an overproduced traditional JRPG like this, short of Dragon Quest, which is as traditional as they come and very lavishly produced, and it's probably the only traditional anime right now with the kind of budget thrown at it that Lost Odyssey had. This was on 4 discs on Xbox 360. Microsoft co-funded it along with Blue Dragon, which was also exclusive to 360, and this might be the last time you ever see an overproduced traditional anime like this. But the great thing is that the people involved in it, just for the sheer caliber of people working on it, and it shows in the game, it must be played. It's got character designs by Takehiko Inoue, who you guys might know as the mangaka for Vagabond. It's got music by Nobuo Matsu, legend of the Final Fantasy series. Music. Director Hironobu Sakaguchi, the guy who created Final Fantasy, the father of Final Fantasy. Now combine those together, you expect greatness, right? And greatness is what you get. The great thing about this is it's very traditional. It's got mortal characters who fill in traditional class like monk, red mage, that sort of thing. And they're very, very well developed, fleshed out characters. But the immortal characters are blank slates, so they can learn abilities off the mortal characters. And they can mix and match, and you can build those immortals. They are immortal in the story, but they are also immortal in gameplay. That's the first time I've ever seen narrative weave with the gameplay. So the immortals, when they fall in battle, they faint basically, but they'll come back to life after 2 turns. And the immortals are so important because it's got a system in this game where the combined HP of your front line forms like a buffer zone. It forms a buffer zone that protects the people at the back. So usually you want to put the mortals at the front, create a buffer zone for the weaker mortal characters at the back. It creates this sort of familial connection to your family. You're the heads of this and I don't want to spoil it too much, but you're going to literally be playing as a family of characters. Now read into that however you want. I don't want to spoil it. I do want you guys to play it, but you've built up this connection to the gameplay to want to protect these mortal characters because you are immortals, right? And this is the kind of game that Square Enix will tell you cannot be made without being in parts. It just is. This was on 4 discs. It had an overworld. You can fly, you can go through ship, all that stuff. So everything Square Enix tells you about not being with the bottomless pockets they have, everything they tell you about not being able to make a thing like this, it's all bullshit. This was probably the last time you're going to get a JRPG this big and expansive and well written. And what's even more beautiful about it is this isn't like fucking Toriyama repeating himself through his character designs or these auteurs repeating themselves. Hironobu Sakaguchi didn't try to plagiarized his own work for this game in terms of story, characters. Takahiko Inoue didn't try to plagiarize his characters or art or character designs from his Vagabond novels in this. Nobumatsu didn't try to evoke Final Fantasy themes the same way FF12's composer tries to riff off his own memorable tracks. They didn't add summons for the sake of adding summons. They didn't add stuff that you see in Final Fantasy games. This truly is an essential thing. It's not just my fanboyism. It's essential, and because it's so hard to access for a lot of people, because it's limited behind, it's an Xbox exclusive. It still is, and it will be. The IP, you must play it, man. However you can play it. It's old 360 emulator, compatibility Xbox One, play it. I cannot stress how good it is. This game had me crying multiple times through its writing alone, let alone what was going on. Kaim starts off as a very stoic, blank slate character, but he's one of the characters where he's justified being like that, and the people he meets and the characters he meets and the memories he has and some of the bizarre, believe me when I say this party, the whole party is composed of a very bizarre dynamic. I don't want to spoil it, but everything that comes with a man who is immortal, who has lived for 1,000 years, the pain, the grief, the sorrow, the joy, the whole, it does it justice.
There's definitely something in this town. You feel it, Zach? Coffee warned me about it. It said, tomorrow you'll arrive in a place that will change your fate.
What do you think is really happening here in Greenvale?
Zach, it's all starting to come together.
Is it a scary story?
So, Deadly Premonition, man, I got so much to say about this, and I try to keep these brief. Some of them I'll be talking a little bit longer than others, but I try to keep them brief and short. So I'm gonna start off with 2 bits of trivia for this game, because before I go into explaining it, you have to understand the significance of this game and what it accomplished, right? So this game is in the Guinness Book of Records, the Guinness Book of Records for being the most divisive horror game, or the most divisive game. Also, Giant Bomb infamously gave this game a 10 out of 10, and while that's shocking, people respect Giant Bomb's score because they're not shills, right? Jeff Gerstmann, notoriously left GameSpot after he refused to give, I think, Kane and Lynch high score or some shit, and ever since then people respected his integrity. So him and his other guys over Giant Bomb gave it 10, and the reason is because this is a mess of a game. This is objectively a mess of ideas, but it's a mess of a game in terms of gameplay. It doesn't know one thing amazingly. Its gunplay was all over the place when it came out on 360. The frame rate was fucking terrible. This was the era where AA games really thrived. You didn't have you had great ideas, and you had a bit of a budget there. It wasn't like an indie game with all the good ideas and low budgets. So somewhere between the AAAs and the indies, and there's no reason why this mess of ideas should have worked, but it worked. It's lovable, it's charming, it's horrific, it's shocking. This game, it's basically Twin Peaks. The game, you have a guy, an agent called Francis York Morgan, and he's investigating the Red Seeds killer. This killer who is calling card, who lives on the scene of the crime, Red Seeds. And he's been chasing him for a couple of years, and he comes to this small little quaint little town of Greenville, and he investigates the murder of a woman who's been killed horrifically, and again there's been red seeds found there, so I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's such a quaint little town. It's got simulation aspects where it has a real-time clock, and you can only talk to suspects and people of interest at times. So if you're a mom and pop store, and the only way you can chat to them is when they're open in the morning from 10 to afternoon, so you got to make sure you drive there, get there on time, you want to speak to them. If they close, you got to wait till next day to do it. So it's got sim aspects to it. It's got investigative detective aspects to it. Now the gunplay, these sections weren't the greatest, and from reading about this game, they never really wanted Swery65, this eccentric developer, nicest guy in Japanese game development. He never wanted shooting, but some of his producers said that, look, the West doesn't want to play a third-person game with a detective where the guy doesn't fire a gun, so they put them in. But to be honest, I feel like these sections, as kind of janky as they were, hope to break up the game, pan out the game, create the ethereal, supernatural quality, accentuate that, because really that stuff isn't evident in the game until much later, and there is a supernatural element to it. For me, Francis York Morgan, the main character, is one of the most memorable video game characters, full stop. Honestly, he's up there with some of the like Solid Snakes and everything. He's so fascinating. Before Mr. Robot even did the fourth wall breaking disassociative identity thing, where you're talking to the player, but you're also talking to someone in the story who's meant to be part of the plot, like a disassociative identity. They did that years before Mr. Robot did it, you know, and the way they did it was amazing, and they ground you in this world, as removed as it is, because it's like a Twin Peaks reference, quaint little American town. It's got pop culture references. The character Francis York Morgan is having conversations with you as a player about John Hughes movies, you know, Breakfast Club, and references that most of us probably understand. We're into you know, the stuff that this game is inspired from. This game had me laughing, it had me crying. It's got amazing writing. All I'll tell you, I'll leave off with this: it's a broken mess. It's a complete broken mess. There's no reason for people to love it, but by the time you finish, you'll fall in love with it. The last mission in this game is called Leave Greenville. You leave the town. You have to drive out the town. I could not bring myself to do that mission because I was so in love and attached to these characters in this town. It's got such memorable NPCs. Every one of them is fucking memorable. The main character is just funny, but he's also very sympathetic, and I don't want to spoil it. And it's a game that you're not going to play repeatedly, but it's a game you have to play once to understand what it is about this game that people fell in love with. It must be played. It's essential. It's probably my biggest guilty pleasure on this list. But so many people you probably respect and I respect have made a case for it, and I'm making a case for it. I played this on 360, got all the achievements. I played this on PS3, got all the achievements. I'm just fucking pissed that Deadly Premonition 2 is now gated behind Switch hardware, man. Go play it. It wasn't too difficult for me to pick this game out of the Contra lineup. I was debating between Super Contra and this one, but I thought Contra 3 Alien Wars encompassed every aspect of what makes Contra fucking great. And you know, when we think of Contra in our minds go back to specific games. You know, we have kind of touchstones to these games, how we remember them. And how I remember Contra is through Contra 3 Alien Wars and SNES, and that goes for a lot of the SNES games, because those games hold up better visually. So for example, old Mega Man is great. Some purists go, old Mega Man is amazing, but some people love Mega Man X, and that's partially due to the aesthetics. It's got the same gameplay, but the aesthetics hold up. They're the kind of games that indie studios are trying to ape now. That's the target you're trying to hit when it comes to pixel art. And the same goes for Contra and some of its features and stuff. Like, so Contra 3 Alien Wars, the whole you could grab onto walls and fire from grabbing walls, you slide down walls, and that's become a staple of every, you know, modern side scroller now. You know, those twitch mechanics where you finesse in it and using little gaps that you can, you know, openings to fire and stuff. So this encapsulates the very best of what Contra does. It has the 1-player, 2-player stuff. It has a shit ton of stuff going on screen. It was probably one of the more difficult Contra games. We all remember, like, you'll see on the screen, this first fucking boss breaking through the wall, this alien. Like, this is what we remember of Contra when we play them. Not to diminish the accomplishments of the previous ones. And the reason why I feel Contra is essential is because this was a genre unto itself. This staked a claim to this particular genre, the side-scrolling shooter, and a lot of people think, oh man, Dark Souls, Returnal, these games are doing something new and innovative, and they're hard for the sake of being hard, but they're not. And these games today owe a lot to this kind of era of games where they didn't hold your hand, where they relied on the player learning the mechanics, dying over and over and over repeatedly, and coming back and just figuring out and mastering the game mechanics, you know. And I feel like this was a product of its era, but also because SNES had a hardware revision which gave it a chipset which allowed them to be more experimental with stuff. So you might remember F-Zero, you might remember Star Fox had like it was using mode 7, this mode which allowed them to have a 3D space with 2D sprites and that kind of thing. So they kind of tried to take advantage of mode 7 by incorporating some of the levels here which were top down and the camera would move with you, so it's more like a bullet hell game. And that's why I feel like this game is perfect for people to visit, and even from a purely academic perspective, see what Contra was doing back then on SNES. Most of the games we're playing today, Doom 2016, Doom itself as a franchise, Returnal, they're basically over-the-shoulder third-person or first-person Contra games. That's literally what they are. Contra became redundant after the 3D era came in, where everything became a third-person action game. You know, when Sony were fucking trouncing Nintendo after the SNES era, everything became third-person, and games like these started to die out in favor of third-person action games. But this is a piece of history that, you know, needs to be remembered, and it's got the best of everything. Many people don't like this top-down vertical Contra. And they've tried to, and particularly games that have tried to copy it in a 2.5D sort of perspective. And even the new Contra, Rogue something, I forgot what it's called, the one that Konami tried to do and it flopped, tried to do it like this. They didn't make a traditional side-scrolling one, as far as I remember. They tried to do the top-down thing and they fucking failed, when this game did it pretty damn well, man. So I feel like this is an important game for you to check out. It's hugely accessible. You could play this on a old, you know, 2000s PC or earlier with ROMs and floppy disks. Bruh, you could have this game on a floppy disk and play the game on an emulator, you know, via ROM. And it was great. It leaned into the 80s B-movie aesthetic. You know, everything was trying to be like a cyberpunk crossed with cheesy B-movie, you know, 80s action hero films and stuff like that. And I love that, and it's such a product of its time. And of all the games, this is the one that holds up the most. I mean, there's no need to play some of the modern indie games that try to ape them, like Axiom Verge tried to ape Metroid, for example, right? But why would you do that when you've got games like Super Metroid, and you've got games like this that do it perfectly well, and they're way more accessible to play? You know what I mean? There's plenty to keep you occupied. So this is an essential game. It's a genre unto itself, and so many games today owe it to this game for what it did.
You know each other?
Rather well, but he has amnesia. Fear not, Elf. I know Geralt. I know his weakness.
You will tell me everything you remember. The entire assault.
And if I refuse?
They'll publicly gut you, skin you, and hang you.
Just like that? For nothing?
No. For Temeria.
So like you're gonna see on a lot of the games on this list, I have to decide which version of the game I'm gonna mention as essential, because a lot of these old games have had re-releases, remasters, that kind of thing. And you're probably even shocked that this isn't Witcher 3, and this is actually Witcher 2. And there's a good reason for that. Half the reason I even wanted to play Witcher 3 was Witcher 2. A lot of people don't give Witcher 2 the credit it deserves for the hype going into Witcher 3, and I feel like, yeah, Witcher 3 is like the benchmark for open world games now. Pre-Witcher 3 world, and there's a post-Witcher 3 world, and now every open world game is trying to be Witcher 3 or reach that level of density, fidelity, whatever, blah blah blah. That's, you know, I feel like that's both to a benefit but also a detriment, because now we get everything has to be open world and everything has to be Witcher 3. But the thing with Witcher 2 is I prefer Witcher 2 to Witcher 3. I feel like it's a more lean game. It has a more focus on the story, which I feel was a big problem with Witcher 3, where it was just like so many threads and so many different branches would open. You would lose that focus on the story. There are characters in Witcher 2 I prefer more than any of the new characters in Witcher 3, like Letho and Yorveth, the elf. I much prefer those characters. Better villain in Letho. I feel like all the combat stuff that you love about Witcher 3 all came from Witcher 2. Witcher 2 was itself a benchmark. Crisis in Witcher 2 always towered as like, yeah, can my rig run Witcher 2? Can my rig run Crisis? And I feel like Witcher 2, the enhanced edition, is the version, the one that's essential for you to play, because one, it's more accessible. You get on 360, you can get on PC, and it comes with all the stuff that the original had, but they've made improvements. A lot of the assets have been reworked and improved, and all in all, it's a better game. Now the issue with the old games, Witcher 1, is that they don't hold up. They were Witcher 1 and even Knights of the Old Republic are on these old BioWare engines, modified BioWare engines, and they're really janky and they don't hold up. Even if you haven't played Witcher 1, Witcher 2 Assassin of the King's Enhanced Edition is a good entry point, because it's got this motion comic like recaps in them. Periodically they do these motion comic recaps of Witcher 1, so you're really not missing out on anything. The backstory that informs where he is now and what his motivations are, even though he's just a wanderer who gets embroiled in all these politics. You know, he is just a witcher like hunts monsters, but this game does a great job of showing you, look, this guy just wants doing his job and he just gets wrapped up in other people's politics and that kind of thing. So and that was they doubled down on that in the next game, where he was just going from kingdom to kingdom, just getting wrapped up in all this shit while he's looking for Ciri, right? And I feel like there's something about this game I just prefer. The cat and mouse between Letho, he's chasing off this guy, trying to stop him from going around and shanking and killing kings. The characters are much more memorable. This would still hold up and is way more accessible than the third game, which can be overwhelming for some people. I feel like not only for visuals, this game is essential to play because it still holds up, and even in its new incarnations it continues to manage to hold up. But everything Witcher is, it owes to Witcher 2, and I feel like this game is, for me, one of the best games ever. It was what Game of Thrones did for television, those early seasons, this game did for video games. There's nothing like it in terms of like writing and gritty, dark, mature fantasy. Dark fantasy is kind of dead right now when you think about it. I mean, think about it, it is kind of dead right now, dark fantasy. And this was the one franchise that actually managed to bring it to a mainstream audience without compromising its deep systems. I feel like Witcher 3's harder difficulties are kind of cheap because you take more damage, but the enemies are all spongy. So when I played Witcher 2 Enhanced Edition, I played it once on normal, then I played it on dark difficulty. There was some difficulty called black or dark difficulty, where if you die, your save data is deleted, and I finished that. It's one of the most enjoyable hard modes of a game I've ever played. I honestly thought I'd hate it, because Witcher's combat is not easy and it has problems, right? But it forced you to engage with those systems, and when you engaged with them, you fucking did amazing, even on those hard difficulties. but I didn't feel the same way with Witcher 3's difficulty. And considering how dense that game is, and then how it becomes spongy, even the walls at the beginning at the tree are, you're like, nah, I just don't feel the same. So for that reason, this is for me the almost right now the perfect Witcher game. Honestly, the enhanced edition. So go check it out. You can get it on 360. You can get it on PC. So yeah, I'm kind of cheating here, but there's no rule that says I can't cheat here, and it's actually this is for your benefit, not for my benefit, and it kind of counts because it's a package, right, of games or compilation of games. I was debating which Castlevania to pick. This was probably the hardest pick for my, you can't pick any one Castlevania. So try to think of a package, and you'll understand why when I make my reasoning. But why pick Castlevania Requiem, which is a re-release, a compilation of Castlevania Rondo of Blood and the game Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So just for Symphony of the Night being this package alone, I'm justifying it. But I feel like there are two eras of Castlevania that need to be represented, because not everything's a Metroidvania, not everything's, like Symphony of the Night. With the older Castlevania games, Castlevania 1, Castlevania Dracula's Curse, and then Super Castlevania 4, which were more linear affairs. You just go from stage to stage. You start outside the castle, you go into the castle, you just go linear. It was more action focused, and there wasn't much backtracking. There wasn't like it wasn't like you go pick an item here, go back, open another area, take an item from there, go back, the Metroidvania style, right? This package encapsulates the very best of both those worlds. So and plus as a big advantage for those of you guys who are like, oh man, which games do I follow, what's the canon, how do they connect, blah blah blah. These games both tie in together. So Castlevania Rondo of Blood was the prequel to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. They both connect. Castlevania Symphony of the Night takes place right after. And what was great about this Rondo of Blood was this particular version, I don't think had been released. Maybe there was a version of this that was released on, I think it was PSP. But they decided to bundle this package together, and this particular game had the anime style cutscenes. So the cutscenes were voiced, and I loved that because that added charm, because it reminded you, as much influence as it took from the West, this still very much was a Japanese franchise. And Richter Belmont was like one of these barbarian looking, beefcake looking warriors, and he was quite charming when you saw the cutscenes. There wasn't much personality to these characters, but this game gave Richter Belmont, the Belmont that you're playing as, charm and personality. Then we go on to Symphony of the Night, which is, everyone agrees, is one of the greatest, if not the greatest Castlevania game ever. You play as Alucard. You're trying to come and save Richter, who goes missing, right, at the end of this game. I don't want to spoil too much, right? And it takes place directly after Rondo of Blood, this game. And when people say Metroidvania, this is what they mean. I know Super Metroid games owe a lot to that, but Castlevania with this gothic art style, amazing music, role-playing aspects, the deep role-playing aspects that Symphony of the Night introduced, made it one of the best. And that's why I can't really put several of these side scrollers on when you have the cream of the cream out there, right? And for me, it was difficult because putting this on meant that I kind of shafted Super Castlevania 4, which is kind of like a pseudo remake of the first Castlevania, which would actually make a better entry point. But you can see now why I did this, right? This is the one package I feel really does represent the best of Castlevania, and it makes this particular franchise way more accessible with this package. I loved it, man. I loved both these games. They're both very different. So you get a taste of old Castlevania, what you can expect of that, which was super punishing, super hard. The Metroidvanias aren't as difficult because you can kind of get leveled up really quick, if you beeline it for the best items, you know, and the best abilities, you can kind of breeze through it. It was only when Symphony of the Night decided to subvert your expectations at the end of the game and flip the castle, the inverted castle rather, that's where the difficulty and the challenge came. But you guys have probably heard, you probably know Castlevania by reputation. It's one of the best games ever made for me, if only for Symphony of the Night in the package. But I still think Rondo of Blood is one of the best linear Castlevania games. You know, a lot of people say that the whole Metroidvania, the whole exploring, backtracking, going, you know, multiple path stuff started with Simon's Quest, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, and that game is decent as well. But I feel like the only way I was gonna get loads of Castlevanias on, and that encapsulates the very best of both areas, was doing this one. So I thoroughly recommend it, even by today's standards. There are games like Blasphemous and lots of other side-scroller that, you know, indies make, that are trying to recapture this. Even Bloodstained, Richard the Knight, trying to recapture Symphony of the Night, and their spin-off games, Curse of the Moon spin-off games, were trying to capture the old Castlevanias, more like the Castlevania 3s, or more like, you know, the Blood Rondos, right? Rondo, I keep calling Blood Rondo of Blood. I just can't. I'm a huge Castlevania fan. I've fallen over this series. It's so great. I'm not even particularly like a huge side-scroller fan, but there's something about Gothic influence and Gothic architecture and Gothic themes and Gothic aesthetic that I just love in everything. That's why Bloodborne is so fucking fascinating. That's why people can't get into Dark Souls, but they love fucking Bloodborne, man. Like, it's just amazing. There was a PlayStation 1 game back in the day, it's not on this list, called Nightmare Creatures, that also had this Gothic, this kind of British Gothic kind of aesthetic, and I love that game. And that franchise is dead now. Fuck knows what they're doing with Nightmare Creatures. Sony haven't bought it back. I'm not even sure if it's a IP they own or anything, but go play this game. It's fucking amazing. The only issue I'd say with this package, Castlevania Requiem, is the voice acting is different. It's a redub. The version of Symphony of the Night that you guys should probably play if you want to play Symphony of the Night is the one on 360 via backwards compatibility, but you can't go wrong. You can't go with Castlevania Requiem. This is a must play for those of you trying to get into the 2D Castlevanias.
Buenos días.
So yeah, Grim Fandango, and a lot of people hate the adventure genre. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of the adventure genre. There was a time where I used to actively avoid it. It's because most of these games require you to figure out in a convoluted way how to get a potato and a stapler to open a locked door. I need to get the stapler attached to the potato, I need to douse it in fucking acid, and I need to stick it into the hole and wiggle it around. Some dumb, convoluted, unintuitive solutions. But for me, there's been a few over the years that I've fucking adored, and Grim Fandango is the one I adore. Now the thing with Grim Fandango is, if it was just a Pixar movie, if they made this game a Pixar movie, I promise you it will be winning Oscars. It will be up there with Soul, Coco, Up, all those things. The writing is fucking impeccable. I'd argue that the writing is actually a cut above even stuff you see in Pixar. So the basic setup of the game is Manny Calavera is like a salesman, a travel package salesman. He sells travel packages for people who have died and are transitioning from the purgatory to the afterlife. So depending on your deeds and your actions and that kind of thing, you can get the amazing package, like a first class, speedy package. For other people whose deeds are really like shitty and rubbish, their transition from purgatory here or wherever it is to the afterlife is much slower and arduous and that kind of thing. And he comes across this woman called Meche who he feels should get the first class package, right? Should get a package that, you know, she breezes through to the afterlife, but for some reason she can't get a ticket. And the tone of this is very much inspired by films like Chinatown, Touch of Evil, right? Detective noir aspect to it, right? And it's steeping with Mexican culture, so it draws from the whole Day of the Dead stuff that the Mexicans believe in. So you could say that this is the closest thing to Coco the game, except the writing's way better. And the difference between this and a lot of other adventure games is you're not just looking to open a door so you can get a key that opens another door. The gameplay loop isn't there for you to just make your way through and just get to the end. Really, the way you want engaging with the world is as you find solutions to these puzzles, you get meaningful interactions with the characters, you get backstory, you get world building, you know, and the world is so fascinating. It drives you forward. You want to get to know this world. You want to get to know the characters in it, these lovable characters. It also has enough freedom to support player agency, like in terms of dialogue trees and how much you go into a dialogue and responses that you give and that kind of thing. It still has its fair share of unintuitive solutions to puzzles, but I can forgive those because the game is so good. It's so lean, it never outstays its welcome. Sometimes it feels like you're playing these games forever, but for the most part, most of the solutions are really smart and you feel really clever for doing it. Manny Calavera is up there also as one of my favorite video game characters of all time. The guy is charming, he's fascinating. Honestly, you play this game, you'll fall in love with this character from the off. The version I am saying is essential is the remastered version with the widescreen aspect, touched up assets and all that kind of thing. You could go back and play the old PC version. It'll probably be cheaper, but you know, there was a time you get this on PSN Plus. It's not that expensive right now. It, for me, is actually the best adventure game I've ever played, and there's been only a very few adventure games I've actually enjoyed. It's not to say I've just played this and I think call it a day. Nah, like I've enjoyed Curse of Monkey Island, LucasArts. This is a LucasArts game also, and Deponia as well. That was another great adventure game. But when I played this, I was like, bruh, this is so fucking good. It's amazing. It's got such a distinct art style, and when they talk about visionaries in the industry, we all know Kojima. Everyone says, oh, Kojima's a visionary, you know. Shigeru Miyamoto is a visionary, you know. But we don't give the Western developers, the Western auteurs, the visionaries, the credit they're due. Tim Schafer is a visionary. Most of his games I've fucking enjoyed. Brutal Legend loved, Grim Fandango loved. Double Fine have done smaller indie sort of, not indie, but smaller games, experimental games like Stacking. Love that game. You know, Psychonauts, I loved it. And there's vision behind these games. And they're not just trying to be Pixar. They're not just trying to be this or that. It's not like Ratchet, which is trying to be like a B-Tech Pixar. It has its own flavor. The writing is pretty much for adults. When you play this game, it's not crass. It's not like Conkers Bad Fur Day trying to be edgy, or South Park trying to be edgy, right? It has its own flavor. It's got classy adult humor, laugh out loud writing, which is not like over-egging it. It's not slapstick. It's very, very sharply written. The amount of different locations they animated in this adventure game is also amazing. You feel like one area flows to the next, and it feels like they didn't just craft these areas to be a puzzle area and this area, that area. It all feels like it flows together. And for me, it's an essential game in this particular genre. If you want to play one, play this one, guys. Promise you will love it.
I'll search for their base from here. Are you listening?
Elvis, find out if this human truly is the Godhead. You're the boss.
That arm is the Godhead, right?
Only thing I'm giving up is an ass kicking.
don't understand women. So you're gonna trade me, huh?
I bet you're not really popular in hell.
Such a sexy man. Just my type.
You're all a bunch of freaking idiots!
The slaves got it easy.
So I was joking with a few people who guessed that one of the games on this list will be God Hand, and I feel like it's not just that because God Hand is one of my favorite games of all time. I feel like considering Platinum can do no wrong nowadays. Like everyone loves Platinum games because they're Nier Automata, Metal Gear Rising, Bayonetta. Like you're always gonna hear praise for Platinum game or hype for any projects they're doing. So it just feels so weird that this went under the radar back in the day. So this game is God Hand, and it was made by a studio called Clover, who's a subdivision within Capcom. So basically Capcom shuttered Clover at some point, and the people from Clover went on to form Platinum Games, so the DNA is very much there. And this game, the way I can best describe this game is, I'll throw out some names that might give you an idea what this game might be like and whether or not you'd like it. Think of it as Streets of Rage meets Fist of the North Star meets JoJo's Bizarre Adventure meets Devil May Cry. It's all that lumped into one. It's very arcadey, as you can see on screen, and it's very difficult. And this game and Vagrant Story on my list are similar in the sense that it's a single player, very linear single player. You could kind of say dungeon focused. Like these aren't dungeons, but they act like very linear dungeons, where you customize your character down to the nth degree. Like, so you're customizing combos, you're making sure that you're equipped for every combat encounter, and you tweak your character, tweak the combos, so if there's a boss or an enemy who's big on the fists, right, like a puncher, right, you want to go for the low moves, the sweeps, the kicks, the low blows, that kind of thing. And this game gives you control over those combos. And it's not only we'll give you a combo for circle, square, square, triangle, not like that. Every stage of the combo you customize, so you just determine what order the moves are done in, how long they go, mixing match them. It's very in depth and it's a very difficult game. It looks easy and very arcadey, so don't let the arcadey aspect of it fool you. It's very, very difficult, and it's Streets of Rage third person by way of Japanese developer Shinji Mikami. And Mikami, I feel like, is one of those visionaries who's really underrated, really underrated. For me, he's never made a game I haven't enjoyed. I loved Vanquish, I loved Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 1, I loved Resident Evil 4, I loved Evil Within. The guy's not made a dud yet, in my opinion. I mean, maybe he worked on some dud games back in the day, but for the most part, the guy is very competent at what he does, and he makes really, really fun games. And for me, this list has a lot of Shinji Mikami games, as you'll see. The brilliant thing about this game is that there's a lot of the DNA, a lot of the stuff you see in this game is going to look slightly familiar to you, and it's going to look like, damn, like this guy moves tanky, sort of like Leon Kennedy. The guy's got some melee animations, so he's got some animations that look familiar, like Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil 4. But this game is something unto itself. It's just bizarre, it's crazy. It encourages exploration, which is crazy considering these are very linear levels. You can find secrets, upgrades to your arsenal, your moves, secret bosses in there. There's lots of procedural aspects to this, because at any one moment, any one of these enemies could become a super mini boss or sub boss. So you always have to be on your toes. You got to make sure that your combo selection is on point. It's a punishing game. It's easy to learn, hard to master, and it's like a game from, like, you look at it and think it's a mindless button mashing game. It isn't. It's every bit as deep and strategic and thoughtful as a Streets of Rage game, as many Streets of Rage guys will tell you. But think of it as through the lens of Japanese game developers. So these really are the stable of people who bought you the Bayonettas, bought you the Devil May Cry, bought you the Vanquishes, you know. So think of it like that going into it. So if you love these games that I've just mentioned, you will fucking love this. And for me, this is one of the greatest games of all time. It's one of the greatest games of its kind, of that stable of balmy, arcadey sort of games, which have punishing difficulty and are really thoughtful, but really fun at the same time. So I could not recommend this game more. You can get this on PlayStation 2 Classics, on PlayStation 3. You could play on emulator, which is probably the preferable way for you guys to play it, because of Sony's policies right now. There's no chance that this will come to PlayStation 4. You know, they don't seem to be interested in bringing their back catalogue of PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 Classics to the current gen, and doesn't look like they're going to remaster this game. I mean, look how many years it's been since this came out. They're not going to remaster it, so go check it out however you can get it. This video, I'm not here to fucking, you know, tell you guys, oh, don't pirate, don't emulate. Developers, publishers, they clearly don't care about legacy. They clearly don't care. So they often say that the simplest ideas are the best. Tetris, Pac-Man, Mario, and that's no different for this game. Katamari Damacy. I remember playing this on PS2 and it was like an eye-opener. You know what I mean? Like, this game was so much fun. I'm shocked it's not a Nintendo game. I don't really need to say much about this game. You saw the footage there. That footage was from Katamari Damacy Reroll, which is the remaster, re-release of Katamari Damacy from the PS2 era. It's on PC and Switch. I wanted to get the original trailer with the original music from 2003 because I loved that music, but I just couldn't do it because the footage was so terrible. It's hard to get PS2 trailers from the era in HD because they weren't HD back then, right? But basically the setup for this game is the King of the Cosmos destroys the cosmos. I forgot, like, I'm winging it here right now, but from what I remember, the King of the Cosmos got angry, destroys the universe, the stars and everything, and his son, the little prince, he's been tasked with creating the stars again. So he does that by rolling up stars. So, you know, he has to start small, they have to roll on to get bigger, and then when it reaches a certain size, the King of the Cosmos takes what you've created and puts it back into the universe, right? Some shit like that. So that's the basic setup. It's got a very touching story when you think about it that way, but the story's not the focus. It's this fun gameplay where you're just rolling up everyday shit like bleach bottles and thumbtacks and fucking dice and shit, starting small, and then as your Katamari gets bigger, the perspective shifts. It starts easy, and then later you get hazards that are in the way that knock your Katamari down. So you have to reach a certain size in a certain amount of time, and the levels are amazing. Like I say, they start simple, like household objects and little things. They get bigger. You're eventually rolling up fucking people and skyscrapers and shit like that. It's just hilarious to watch. It's a great stream game, which is great that Katamari Damacy spurned a franchise, like multiple games and remasters and the like, so that people can see and just enjoy and have fun. This is epitome of an original, simple idea polished to the nth degree, and those kind of games are the games that will withstand the test of time. I feel, you know, like I say, I'm shocked it wasn't a Nintendo didn't think of this first, you know. and it's got full of charm. The music is amazing. When they localized, they brought it over to the West, which a game like this back then was totally unheard of. These obscure sort of Japanese games coming over the West was really unheard of. So when it came over, it was really, really special. But they retained the Japanisms rather. So the items, objects in the environment were all Japanese products that people are more familiar with. Ramen bowls, Japanese cleaning products and items and like that. So it retained that. Even though it spurned a franchise which was like internationally well received, right? So go check it out. It's one of the funnest games. I never was able to keep up with some of the future, like Touch My Katamari was one of them. We Love Katamari, that was another sequel, I think. But because the platforms kept shifting, like, so this is PC and Switch now, even though this was a PS2 game, I would argue you should go check out the PS2 version on emulator. I don't know what changes they've made. Maybe they've made changes to the music, but go back to the PS2 version. That's the one I remember. Amazing game, lots of fun, man. Essential because it's a simple idea that has. I don't think another game's done this. You know, if you're talking about a game like this, a lot of people have tried to copy this system, right? But for me, this was the one back then that did something new and fun. It deserves to carve out its place amongst that stable of games like the Tetrises, the Pac-Mans. A simple idea, polished to the nth degree, that holds up forever.
I'm ready for anything.
Time for justice!
The fate of the free-thinking world is in your hands.
I'm afraid that means the dead letter office for you.
The mission is falling apart.
A Psychonaut must always remember how to roll with it.
What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing?
This is a mission about the fate of the world. Can you do that?
Yes, if I can find some bacon.
I'm going to ignore that last part.
So I got kind of cheeky there. With the trailer you just saw was from Psychonauts 2, which is out at the end of August. It would have been 16 years since the first one came out, so I got a bit cheeky because I'm hyped for it. I thought I'd shamelessly plug it, right? Because it's a game that not many people are looking forward to because not many people played it. There's lots of other platformers, you know, people know more, like Banjo-Kazooie, Mario, all that shit. Not shit, but you know what I mean. Psychonauts, man, that like a lot of Double Fine games by the mainstream audience, gaming audience, overlooked. It's from the mind of Tim Schafer, the original Psychonauts, and what's brilliant about it, it's like the best platformers, action platformers out there. It's endearing, it's charming, but it has the quality of writing, the quality of humor that Double Fine are known for. So this game is about a character called Raz. His actual name is Rasputin, but they call him Raz, and he is in a circus family. And he's got a fascination with telekinesis. He's gifted, like he has potential to be a sort of psychic, you know. So he reads some pamphlet, and he goes, you know what? I want to go to psychic boot camp. I want to go to this boot camp for psychonauts, which is a play on psychic astronauts. And he runs away from home despite his dad's protestations to this summer boot camp. Where a bunch of kids are training to be psychonauts, and I don't want to really spoil it too much. He's got there's a dark backstory to his character. It looks all kiddie friendly and all that stuff, but it balances this fine line between wry adult humor and, you know, endearing charming sort of, you know, family humor. The great thing about this game was like Inception, the game before Inception ever existed. You jump into people's minds as Psychonauts to help them work through their psychological problems. So every person's mind that Raz jumps into manifests differently. If they're like emo, it's gonna be like I'm using an example. You're not gonna get levels like that here, but you jump into the mind of an emo and it'll be like a rainy, grey sky. Everything's kind of bland and kind of like, you know, it's kind of like every level here is a manifestation of different characters' brains, and he goes in and tries to help them. And the great thing about it is that the best platformers out there, the world you're exploring has to be fascinating. It has to encourage you to explore, and this game, Psychonauts, creates those kind of worlds. Not just the worlds, you know, that you're playing from level to level, but they create this summer camp area that you come to between missions, and it's populated with really endearing, cute kids, like what you'd imagine school to be like when you were that age. You know, it's got a little character called Dogen, who's like adorable. He's like a little paranoid kid, and with his psychic powers, he just lashes out and he blows things up. So they've told him to wear a tinfoil hat to keep his psychic powers in control. There's the bully characters in there. There's a character who's quite obviously Russian, and he's fascinated with finding bears, and he's fascinated with the wilderness. And then you have interaction with him and one of these bully kids who calls him a commie and bullies everyone. And it's got that like really charming, endearing Hollywood school kid movie vibe. But the world they create, the summer camp they create, is very expansive. It's much bigger than I thought it would be when I originally played this back on PlayStation 2. And it encourages you to explore because it doesn't hold your hand. You know, it rewards your curiosity. A lot of people said that about Breath of the Wild, that it's a world they plunk you into and they go, just explore, just go. They don't hold your hand too much. They give you rudimentary sort of, you know, markers to meet, right? But this place makes you want to explore. And a lot of what Double Fine did with their adventure games, where they just plunked you into the world and you just figure the puzzles out, they've brought that stuff over. They reward your curiosity, they reward your intuition, and they try not to hold your hand too much, and that makes the world feel way better. And you kind of get a more it's a more organic way of exploring this world and getting to know this world. And it's the kind of stuff that games today don't do, which is why everyone raved about Breath of the Wild. And it's got their distinct Double Fine art style. Like I say, their games don't try to ape popular Disney films, popular Pixar movies. They try to create their own distinct style. You know, even if it looks weird and awkward and against the grain, it's like how everyone who came across Kaiji was like, oh, what is this? What is Kaiji, man? What's this distinct, weird art style? It's not what I'm used to. I wanted everything to look like Bleach and Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen, like sharp and angular and like, you know, like you know, typical shonen that you see these designs, right? So it had that sort of, I think maybe the art style would have put people off back in the day. It's been 16 years, man. We've been waiting for this sequel, and for me, it's an essential game that you should check out. Is because this genre has been dominated by the Banjo-Kazooies. Oh man, Rare, man, Banjo, man, they were legends, and Mario 64, man, legends, and all that stuff. You know, Spyro, everyone's talking about. Ratchet and Clank, everyone's talking about. But Psychonauts did things completely differently from those. They weren't similar. You know what I mean? They weren't like carbon copies or iterative. You know what I mean? It was its own thing, and I think the story about helping people work through the psychological problems, but doing it in such a friendly, sort of approachable way, and the motifs and the aesthetics and the vision that this game had, it's essential you guys check it out, because it's fallen beneath the radar. And I hope now that Microsoft owns Double Fine, and you know, they've rejuvenated the studio, because the studio was is one of them studios that keeps on trucking, and you wonder how they do it. And they're such an inventive, creative studio, man. And I hope you guys get, with this second game coming out soon, have a fire lit under you to go check out Psychonauts 1. You can get Psychonauts 1 on the original Xbox. You can get it on Xbox One via backwards compatibility. There's a digital version you can check out. And the sequel is coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox One. So thoroughly recommend you guys check out the first game. It's I can't describe it. If you're not familiar with Double Fine and their work, it may not mean nothing to you, but now's the time to check this out, man. You're probably wondering why Far Cry 3 isn't on this. Here's why. I'm not particularly a fan of the Far Cry series, particularly the last couple of games, but I love when games incorporate immersive sim aspects, and there's a subgenre of games I love to this day. Games immediately get my respect when they attempt immersive sim features because of how difficult it is to do, and how much work's going into ensuring a game doesn't break because of them. Far Cry 2's story is simple. You're tasked with hunting down an arms dealer who's selling weapons to both sides in an African conflict. The story, while compelling, isn't why the game's good. The player can succumb to malaria in the game. The character's weapons jam and rust. Fire is simulated and areas can catch fire, which you can use to your advantage. You can recruit members of different factions who will come to help you if you fall in battle. But if they arrive in the middle of a particularly hectic fight and they take damage and die while helping, they're dead for good. It's like the Fire Emblem system, except in an FPS. A lot of games get praised for simulation aspects, animations grounding you in the world to the point of monotony, everything taking ages to do in aid of immersing the player in the world. But back then, Far Cry 2 was criticized for these things. When you open a map, you wouldn't go to a menu screen. You'd hold up a map and have to chart your way and find your bearings. You can mark places on the map, and points of interest were only marked if you found them. No NPCs giving you nuggets of information to their whereabouts. You truly felt vulnerable in this game, a white boy lost in Africa, stuck in the civil war, and the game's story benefited from it. It made hunting this elusive arms dealer, the Jackal, even more rewarding. The Far Cry series has streamlined a lot since then, but that's part of the reason it lost its charm. This game is essential for everything it was doing before it became fashionable for games that weren't Thief or Deus Ex to do so. Probably an obvious choice. The version I'm picking was the version I played in the UK on the SNES, and I think the last version released in the series of Street Fighter 2 releases. This version introduced Akuma as well as a suite of new combos. Super Street Fighter 2 is responsible for the thriving arcade culture at the time. The game was ubiquitous. There wasn't a soul on the planet that didn't know what it was. Everything 2D beat-em-ups do today are thanks to Street Fighter 2. They broke the mold with Street Fighter 2. Everything now is purely iteration. You're probably wondering that there are far more nuanced competitive beat-em-ups today, ones doing the rounds on the FGC circuit, deserving of the Ascension moniker, but Street Fighter 2 still holds up. You had your entry-level fighters with easy movesets like Ryu and Ken, who were immediate go-tos, then intermediate fighters like Guile and Bison, where timing-based disciplines were required, as well as crouch holding. Then you had advanced characters that were hard to master like Vega and Dalsim, who could control the entire playable area through zoning. It was nuanced as fuck even back then. It was and always will be a cultural phenomena. The version I suggest is Udon's Street Fighter 2 HD Remix, which brings the sprites to the level of our contemporaries now, with the same unblemished core systems running underneath. I was debating whether to put this on or Batman Arkham Asylum or Batman Arkham City, as these games all contribute something similar to the video game landscape. In the end, I decided which one I thought was most polished and a joy to play, but I thought I'd just acknowledge it. Spider-Man has a fast travel system I never used once. Why? Because simply navigating in this world was a joy. I never quite felt that games had nailed down grappling hook based traversal or web swinging. Bionic Commando in 2009 came close, but honestly Spidey PS4 mastered it. In terms of navigating a world, I think no game has done it better. Comic book adaptations in video game form haven't had a good track record anyway. They never truly made you feel like you were embodying the characters till Batman Arkham and Spidey games. Traversal aside, the combat felt tight. The game encouraged you to use your entire arsenal, unlike Batman, which never really encouraged you to use more than 5 out of the 20 or so abilities in your arsenal. And even when they did, it would be in scenarios built specifically for a few of them. This is where Spidey had the edge. What Insomniac did making Spidey their own and telling a story through their own lens that felt in keeping with tradition was remarkable. Tight controls, rock-solid performance, and less emphasis on checklisting than, say, Batman games make this an essential game in its genre. Again, you're probably wondering why this isn't the original Dooms. I don't want to say 2D because it was in a 3D plane, but you know what I mean, 2D Doom, or why this isn't Quake, or why it's not Unreal Tournament games, right? Don't think of Essential Games as just retro and old and the first ones that did it. That's not the basis on which I'm deciding these. I'm basing these decisions on games I feel are essential, that represent the culmination of the very best of what these games or franchises do. And I feel like the games they were trying to make back in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, these Doom games, what they were trying to make was this, and they were limited only by the hardware. The hardware was what was holding them back. They wanted a first-person game which ran smoothly, was fast, maneuverability was not a challenge. There was no things holding you back, no immersive sim aspects holding you back. It was very arcadey, and I feel like what they accomplished Doom 2016 is not only faithful to those old games without evolving it too much like Eternal did, which some people had issues with the story and the reason why Eternal's not on this list, because I think this represents the culmination of what they wanted to achieve even back then. We talk about playing games now, remasters, and then we say to ourselves, this is how I remembered playing it. We look at these old games through rose-tinted spectacles. Sometimes we go back to games and we think, this is a bit rough, this is not as great or as fun as it used to be, and I feel like that with the old Doom games. But this is one of those games where I'm not an FPS fan. I really am not an FPS fan, and I feel like this particular game is accessible because look, the fidelity, the visuals will hold up, and they scale, and it seems as though they've had a ray tracing upgrade to Doom 2016 recently, which means that it's going to scale even better for later generations, right? Not only does this feel like the old Dooms, but this is a FPS made for people who aren't fans of FPSs. When you're on a run through a level in this game, and it's a challenging game, there's a moment that comes where you just get in the fucking zone. You're in the zone. You're wondering, how the fuck am I not dying? How am I getting all these kills? How the fuck did I get through that? That experience, that rush, that sort of fucking risk-reward endorphin rush, honestly, for Doom 2016, unmatched. I don't think I've felt that with any game. There's a level of challenge here which is not frustrating. It's like, let me try again, let me try again, let me try again. It just keeps bringing you back because the loading's great. The performances, they've always tried to target, like, even on low-end hardware, they've always tried to target like 60 FPS. They want to make sure that the vision is there intact for Doom. There's grimy, demonic, and it's never been about the story. It's always been about the way these games feel to play, and I feel like this is the Doom that is gonna, like, the old Dooms can get cut off now. Forget those. This is the new bar. This is the one that's going to be remembered. This is the version on which they will start to iterate. You will see that franchises reach their pinnacle, their peak, before they have to be rebooted or changed and that kind of thing. Right? Doom had its time, Final Doom, Doom 3, whatever. Doom 2016, I feel it's just an essential game. It's made for, one, because it's made for people who don't like FPSs. So if you're jaded by COD, try playing Doom for about an hour. Just keep going through it. Go through Doom for about an hour or something, and you will realize what I mean when I say this cycle, this rush that you get from playing the catharsis. It's got cathartic violence. It's brutal and whatever, but there's something about it that it's not the same as other things. Everything's so snappy, so quick, you know, and it's not just, oh, there's one way to do things. You know, you can upgrade your weapons however you want. If you prefer certain weapons, you know, you can decide to go all in on those weapons, but you're constantly having to move. It's like a dance almost, Doom is, and it's more of a dance now than it was back then. You're constantly having to kill enemies to get health back, making sure you keeping doing damage on the big guys. You're constantly moving. You cannot stop for a moment, and there's a thrill to that. Honestly, there really is. There is a place for these kinds of games that have no fucking narrative. You know, have no narrative, are pure gameplay experiences. And when we're talking about gameplay is king, I think Doom is like that. Doom is a simple, really under the hood, it's a simple concept, polished to the nth degree. I said that for fucking Katamari Damacy, and I'm saying it for this. Doom really is a simple thing, and it's challenging at the same time. You know what I mean? And the same with God Hand. Easy to pick up and learn, hard to master, especially in those higher difficulties. Doom 26, look at this, man. How could you? Believe me when I say I am not an FPS fan. The only FPS franchise I've even a passing affection for is Crisis franchise, and I finished 3 recently because I played it halfway and I never finished it, so I managed to play it again on Xbox One backwards compatibility. But Eternal's not on this because now it's starting to evolve the series. Now it's becoming something a lot different to what, you know, what its DNA was. But I think this is for me the peak of OG Doom brought to the 21st century, and it will scale and it will hold up. And you know, there's very few games that are this polished. One thing, for whatever bad things people said about Doom 2016, one thing they never criticized was the performance, and performance is king nowadays. You fuckers with the 60 FPS, 120 FPS, all that shit. You guys want this, and this game was doing tight, rock solid performance, even on last gen hardware. So yeah, essential game. Go check it out. I was a big fan of Echo PS2, but nothing came close to what Shadow of the Colossus accomplished. I feel like even today, Shadow of the Colossus for me is the director's magnum opus. I think Last Guardian tried to be like a hybrid of Echo and Shadow of the Colossus, but it just didn't feel the same. For me, Shadow of the Colossus is like a masterclass in one environmental storytelling. There's very little dialogue. Most of the dialogue, not most, pretty much all of the dialogue comes from Dormin, this entity who you've come to try and seek aid in reviving your sister, your wife, or your girlfriend. I don't think it's ever really described who this woman, this girl is that you're trying to resurrect. And he's come to this strange, barren land where only these, I think 13, 14, I think 15 Colossi. Go defeat these Colossi. Very simple. Go defeat these Colossi for Dormin, and I will resurrect your love, your sister, your wife, your girlfriend, whichever. And you're wondering, what is this place? You're constantly, while traveling this land, it was completely barren, completely devoid of life, apart from birds flying or some little salamanders and shit like that. And slowly over time, like an hour, 2 hours in, you're taking down these colossi, and you're actually feeling a little bit sorry for them. You see them and you're like, damn, these colossi are not hurting anyone. They're just chilling, they're roaming the land, you know, minding their business, fam. And they're so majestic. They're not evil, vicious, terrifying. They're actually majestic. You're in awe. And I've never had that feeling of awe in any game ever. You can be awed by the density of a world, the visuals, but I've never quite been in awe of what I was fighting, and I never felt like so emotional and like slightly weird. Like, am I the good guy? Am I the bad guy? I'm slaying these creatures. They're not doing anything. And like I say, I'm trying to avoid major spoilers in this essential games list, so there will be minor ones. But I feel like the game is lean. It's basically a boss rush mode. There's no fat in between you doing random side quests, fetch quests. There are some sub-objectives, but it's never made, you're never told to go do them. It's just something you pick up intuitively along the way. And every one of these colossi is like a puzzle in itself. It's not only a boss battle, but it's a puzzle. How do I get to its weak point? How do I get it to do what I want it to do to kill it? And that, the way that your grey matter starts churning and turning, it's really fucking rewarding, you know. And when you figure it out, it's the most rewarding thing ever to be like, yes, I took down this thing. I've never quite felt the heft. You're always fighting bosses, you're jumping, side strafing, dash, attack, this kind of shit in action games, but you never quite feel the weight and the heft of having to take down these giant things. In video games, a tiny character like Dante can take on a big enemy, slashing away. There's no physics to it, there's no heft or weight to it. In this, dude, you're on top of one of these colossi, it sneezes, your fucking half your life is wiped out. They make you feel the weight and consequence and the heft of these things. It's an essential game because there really is nothing like that. I think Journey came close to this environmental storytelling, this feeling of connection to the world, which you can't really understand what it is about the world and the game, what you're doing, that makes you feel some way, about it. But for me, this came out on PS2. They remastered it, re-released it on PS3. It's on PS4, so it's a remaster of a remake. I guess it's not even a remake. I think Bluepoint said that it's still got the original game running under it. They used their engine to augment it rather than redo everything. So it's still essentially the same game with some tweaks to the controls and performance. But as you see in here, this game is one of the special games, essential games, but it's also, I think, for me, one of the best games of all time. So I said this wouldn't be the best games of all time list, but it's hard for them to converge somewhere. It's a revelation. It's a revelation once you finish this game, man. Okay, I'm gonna say this now. Resident Evil 1 remake, for me, of all the remakes I've ever played, is by far the best remake I've ever played. The best remake of any game I've ever played. I feel like the best a remake can do is, one, enrich the original experience, be faithful to the original experience, don't mess with that secret sauce, right? But also maybe subvert expectations, maybe add stuff to it, you know, give long-time fans, old fans, something new to enjoy, enhance, enrich it, do the stuff to it that you couldn't do back then because of limitations, memory, you know, budget, all that kind of thing. And I feel like it's shocking, right, for me to say that in a world where Resident Evil 2 Remake exists and FF7 Remake Part 1 exists. But in the case of FF7 Remake Part 1 and Resident Evil 2 Remake, those games can exist alongside the original. They stand next to each other. Resident Evil 2 Remake is a very different game from the original Resident Evil 2. They're their own thing in some way. They can stand together, respectably. FF7 Remake Part 1 can stand respectably with the original. They're essentially two very different games. They're trying to follow the story, yeah, but they are fundamentally different games. But Resident Evil 1 Remake was not only faithful to the original, from the fixed camera angles to the tank controls and all that stuff, and it not only brought it up to its contemporaries visually, it kept the charm of the goofy dialogue that the original had. You know, and it's one of the rare cases where the remake actually cancels the original. You know, like I say, 2 Remake doesn't cancel the original 2. 7 Remake Part 1 doesn't cancel the original 7. It will still hold up. But this is the rare case where the remake is so fucking good. It's so good that it cancels the original. And the original is worth revisiting purely academically for how many versions there were, how fucking terrible the dialogue was. You know, just purely academically. But I feel like this game retains the great fucking resource balance, limited inventory, limited resources, the enemy placements, and it brings Spencer Mansion, which is arguably one of the most memorable locations in a video game ever, and it just cranks up to 11. And I feel like it's rare for games to have locations that are themselves characters. So by Rapture and Bioshock, everyone will agree with you. Rapture itself is like a character. You roam through that world without any enemies there, you'll be fascinated. You would be looking in every corner and that kind of thing. This remake didn't seek to modernize it for the sake of modernizing it, you know, make it completely different. It wasn't a reboot or anything like that. It was a pure faithful remake. They enhanced what was there with the plot line with Lisa Trevor, which enriched the lore and the mythology and about the guy who created this mansion and why things are the way they are here, what's going on, where are they, enriched that. It subverted it with puzzles, placements were a bit different, right? But it has everything you remember and more. And the issue is RE3 Remake that Capcom did felt like a demake, like they took away things and replaced them, and some areas got replaced by things that weren't inspired. They were just generic fucking, you know, generic stuff that you expect from third person genre. I feel like this is a perfect remake. If you've never played the original one, you might not understand why I call it the perfect remake. But if you've played enough of these remakes, then you'll realize how faithful it is and how great it is. And it never tried to compromise on the tank controls and the fixed camera angles, which was a more product of their time when you think about it. But like I say, you have to be, if you're gonna remake something, do it in every fucking sense of the word. Every sense of the word. And this game still gets under my skin. It still chills me to the bone. I could be in an empty room and I'm like getting shivers, man. And it's so beautiful. And look at this game still holds up. I feel like a lot of the games on this list are going to be there because they've reached a point where they are the ceiling for that particular genre. Ceiling for that particular genre, and you could up-res it, you could increase the FPS and it would still hold up. The old Resis will not hold up at fucking 4K resolution and 120 FPS. But this reached a point for Resident Evil, particularly the OG Resident Evil style, that now they never need to touch it up. They could just up-res it, but you know, they could. It will fundamentally be the same game. It's not something that needs to be remade again. they reached a point. Look how great it looked for GameCube, and it was brilliant. They kept the goofy dialogue. The Jill sandwich line is still in there, except slightly tweaked, slightly different, you know. And it's a perfect remake. Like, I don't use the word perfect lightly. It's a perfect fucking remake. And I don't know what Capcom's doing. When auteurs, particularly Japanese auteurs, leave where they work, those publishers, they go down the shitter, fam. It's like when everyone jumped ship from Konami. Konami just fucking fell, fam. Shinji Mikami, Hideki Kami all jumped ship. Some went to Platinum, some went to Tango Gameworks. And the franchises were never the same again. And this was a rare case of the original creator. Shinji Mikami was the father of Resident Evil. He birthed it. He was able to come back and do his own remake. Very rare to do that. Square can't get the original guys that made Final Fantasy VII back. That creative team, that secret source that made the original. So it's always going to be in the shadow of the original. 2 remake was, I think, holds up nicely next to it. Well, it's yet to be seen with the FSN remake. It's going to have to be living in the shadow. But there is a perfect, amazing remake out there, and it's Resident Evil 1 remake. Go play the remaster. It's on every fucking console conceivable. It's no fucking excuse.
Bayonetta.
Cheeky. Throwing me these cheap toys.
Don't worry about quality. I've got quantity.
So when Shinji Mikami, the guy who made Resident Evil 1 Resident Evil Remake, was about to make Resident Evil 4, the guy said, "Hold my drink," and that literally involved him passing the drink from one hand to his other hand because he was just about to surpass himself. That same shit happened with Hideki Kamiya, the guy who made Resident Evil 2, the guy who made Devil May Cry, the father of Devil May Cry. When he left Capcom, he goes, "I'm gonna fucking surpass Devil May Cry, and I'm gonna make a case for this. All you Devil May Cry stans, you fanboys, gonna sit there saying, why the fuck is Devil May Cry on? The story's better, blah 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 blah." Best example I can give you of Bayonetta being just superior to Devil May Cry, why it's essential and why it's amazing, is you remember that fight between Rock Lee and Gaara in Naruto? You remember Gaara had ankle weights on and how he was fighting? And then how he was fighting when he took the fucking ankle weights off. That's like going from Devil May Cry to fucking Bayonetta. Bayonetta compared to Devil May Cry is like Rock Lee wearing ankle weights. You remove the weights, you get Bayonetta. And the comparison I can make is Devil May Cry 4 and Bayonetta. Both came out the same generation. Both of them have remasters you can play today. Go play Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, the remaster, and then go play Bayonetta for about an hour or two. And then come back to me and tell me the game is not faster, more fluid, tighter in terms of frame rate, in terms of latency, in terms of responsiveness. It's like you're unshackled. It's like the fucking ankle weights are off. Bayonetta's story may not be as interesting as Devil May Cry. The Devil May Cry story has been able to stretch out over like 3-4 games, however many it is, right? 5 games rather, and that's fair enough. But this is still the same guy who made Devil May Cry, and he said, I am gonna crank that absurdity. If you thought fucking Dante with a pizza in his mouth skateboarding on some fucking demon was crazy, you have not played Bayonetta. Bayonetta 1 at the time, and still is for me, the height of Platinum's action games. Platinum are the masters of action games. Like, it's undeniable. Metal Gear Rising, Bayonetta, fucking Neo Automata, they're just a masterclass. And Bayonetta is so fluid, so responsive, the action is tight. This was published by Sega at a time where Sega actually had a really good partnership with Platinum. They published Vanquish by Shinji Mikami, legend, and they published this Bayonetta, and I think Bayonetta was Platinum's first game, if I'm not mistaken. This is where the engine came from that they use now. They use for everything. They used it for TMNT game, Transformers game. They used it for a whole bunch of games they use now. Is all based on this engine, because you're gonna notice similarities. There's always some slow-mo time, parry, dodge mechanic in every one of these games. You know, and even playing Neo Automata, and if you have never played Bayonetta, you're gonna see this is where that fucking industry-leading engine came from. The Bayonetta engine, the 60 FPS engine that could run even on a fucking PlayStation 3 or 360. They are masterclass of action games, and Bayonetta for me was the pinnacle. I know they've made sequels, but I think you could play one as a self-contained game, and it's you can play it across more consoles than just Switch, because it's 2 and 3 are now Switch exclusive, which pissed me off. Nintendo somehow managed to snag these exclusives, but because it's published by Sega, it's got some really funny Sega references. It's humor, it's absurd, it's like some of the early boss fights in this outdo anything that Devil May Cry has ever done in terms of sheer size and scale and involvement, you know, in terms of like stages and taking them on. And the storytelling was snappy and quick. It would reward you with medals, and instead of S ranks, you would get like a bronze, silver, stone, bronze, silver, gold, platinum medals, and you would get them not just for completing the whole chapter, but you'd get them for every little stage of it. And it had that really great score attack, competitive replayability there, and it had lots of unlockables, crazy amount of weapons, it had fucking outfits. It's just it's the whole shebang, fam. It's such a it's something you have to play. I can't describe it. You can look at the footage, right, and say like, wow, this looks like something fucking crazy, insane. It looks like a button masher. It's every bit as deep as a Devil May Cry game. In fact, probably more so. It's actually probably more difficult on the higher difficulties than Devil May Cry games. And I feel like I think there's a sexism. I don't believe everything is sexism. But I feel like Bayonetta didn't do as amazingly. Otherwise, it would have justified a sequel that would have come out on the platforms that most of us are familiar with, like the Xboxes and the PlayStations. That's why Nintendo actually had to fund the sequels to 2 and 3. So it probably didn't do well. They probably couldn't even get the sequels made without Nintendo. It was because there was a female protagonist. People just wanted more Dante again. And they're like, what is this crap? This is Devil May Cry, but some skinny, objectified female and that kind of shit. And if you look, I'm not a big fan of fan service, but if you look past that, you'll find her rock solid. It's just there will be a smile on your face in the combat. She has whips, she has swords, she can attach fucking shotguns to her legs and then pistols to her arm. Or you know what, I want to attach fire claws to my legs. I want to carry shotguns. You can mix and match them. And craft her playstyle to your liking in any way you want. You know what I mean? If you want to boost a certain combo with a gun attachment or a weapon attachment, you can do that and create almost within the parameters of existing combos. You can kind of modify and create those combos. It's some of the best things that Clover and Platinum were doing in their time. Honestly, they added that to that. And a lot of people say, Devil May Cry 5's better. That you'll still feel like a geriatric tortoise a geriatric tortoise playing Devil May Cry when you go to Bayonetta. You'll be like, bloody hell, man. It just doesn't feel as tight and responsive and fluid. The remaster just accentuates how fucking rock solid this was. And I feel like with Devil May Cry games, gameplay is king. So you can forgive a story not being as good as Devil May Cry 5 or 4 or 3 or whatever it is. But the last time I loved the action game so much was Devil May Cry 3. 1 was decent, 2 was forgettable. 3, the last time I felt this much joy playing an action game, like I said, was Devil May Cry 3. Tight, responsive, challenging, great replayability, absurd, over the top. He brought that energy back. And we had Devil May Cry 4, which wasn't the greatest. We had DMC by Ninja Theory. God bless them, they tried something new, but people didn't really take to it. So this is precisely what people wanted and needed, and they did this before Devil May Cry 5 came. So Platinum, this is why Platinum are the kings of things. This is an essential game. This is, for me, the best action game, hack and slash action game I've ever fucking played. Go play it.
So the noble shinobi stands in our way.
It seems fate still doesn't want you dead.
So there's also no rule on this list that I can't have multiple games from the same creators or authors, right? Sometimes these creators have a breadth of work that isn't all just the same, even though they share the same DNA. Some of them are so radically different, so radically innovative and groundbreaking that you are bound to have multiple games from the same creator, and that's no less the case for Miyazaki, who obviously created Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne. And it was tricky for me to put this on because I was debating putting on another game, Ninja Gaiden 1 by Tomonobu Itagaki, right? Which is ironic because actually From Software made a really shitty copy of Ninja Gaiden once upon a time on 360, I think it was. It's called Ninja Blade, and it wasn't that great, and it was clearly trying to be like Ninja Gaiden at the time. And I feel like Ninja Gaiden and Sekiro share a lot in common, but I think Sekiro is just a far superior game, I feel like, in thoughtfulness. Now, this is basically parrying the game. Like, for me, even a simple game can be made even more deep with a simple parry mechanic, and I don't feel that people use the parry mechanic often. A lot of games have a parry mechanic, but they don't use them. They just find a way to work around it, not having to parry, over level, over spec your character, and just do that. And that was the case with Dark Souls, where there was a parry mechanic, a parry and riposte mechanic, but after a time nobody was really using it, because you could just overpower your character, spec into something, and just figure ways to defeat the bosses. And I feel like that maybe got to Miyazaki at some point. He goes, man, there's a parry and riposte mechanic in my games, but nobody's using it. So what do? I will double down on it. It's my way or the highway. I'm gonna force people to learn the parry mechanic. So this game, Sekiro, is one of those games that will break you before it rebuilds you. Honestly, it will break you. It's like the biggest parry tutorial you'll ever fucking see. The whole game is a parry tutorial. you play. I'm not gonna go too much into the story. Like, even I've forgotten what the fucking story. There's these warring clans. There's a fallen clan, and they all want glory once again, because there's an heir to the dragon bloodline. He's got dragon blood, and the dragon blood that makes you immortal. So a lot of people are vying to obtain this dragon blood from this kid, so that they can restore their former glory, or their clan's former glory. And there's internal conflict, civil war in this samurai clan. It's kind of like samurai with fantasy elements, like mashed together. It's just, you can kind of tell on screen right now. And I feel like Miyazaki thought, you know what, I will break people, I will force them to learn this mechanic and realize just how satisfying and engaging it can be. So in this game, you really can't make any headway unless your offense and defense are on point. It's all about offense at the same time as defense. There's no way you're killing enemies if you're not learning their attack patterns, you're not learning their blows. And this goes from the smallest enemy to the biggest boss, and the way it ramps up is just fucking beautiful. You notice that people have a sort of a stagger meter, right? You can see on the top the orange bars of the stagger meters. If you're good at defensing and timing those parries, keep doing it. So a strong defense is actually the best offense in this game. You can break open an enemy's defenses to strike the killing blow. So killing an enemy's overcoming your enemies does not involve whittling away necessarily a health bar, chipping away, finding openings. It's all about making sure you're deflecting their blows enough for them to open up their guards, so you can get in there and do the kill. So most enemies can be killed in either 1 or 2 hits once you've learned their attack patterns, and it's got a great rhythm to the battle. It's like a dance, a rhythm to the battle. Add to that a whole bunch of tools and weapons and arsenals and supplementary weaponry to help you with, exploiting the weaknesses of certain enemies. This is a game where they plunk you in there and they tell you to go, like all the great Soulsborne game. But I feel like it's so remarkable that this game is published by Activision. And Activision make games for casuals, the casual crowd, but they actually decided, look, we're going to bankroll, publish this game, which is punishingly difficult. It's more difficult than, say, the Dark Souls games, the Bloodborne games, because in Dark Souls and Bloodborne you can spec into something and just overcome something just by brute force, time and brute force. In this, there is nothing like that. You can't, your attacks won't get stronger, your defenses won't get stronger, your health bar can go bigger, and you can farm enemies, but you still have to overcome the inherent challenge of learning the attack patterns, and those attack patterns will keep changing. They'll never be the same. They'll keep mixing it up, and it's got stealth mechanics, like something like a Tenchu, right? Light stealth mechanics. You can use stealth, but more often than not, they force you to get into battle. So it's Miyazaki just telling you, look, I'm gonna make you learn this. You're gonna be trying to find ways around these battles, but there really is no way through these battles other than charging straight through. And obviously, like all of his games, you die, you learn, you die, you learn, you die, you learn, to the point where you're just a pro. Honestly, these games of his, and particularly this one, can make you feel like a pro, like make you play games like a pro. Honestly, there's nothing been quite like that. Nothing. I'm not going to say whether or not Dark Souls or Demon Souls or Bloodborne is on this list or not. I don't want to spoil it for you, but Sekiro definitely is one of those essential games. There's nothing quite like it. I think some people, there are games where you are frustrated by the difficulty spike and you just give up because you're like, this game's beat me and broken me. But there's something about this game where it's just so cool, and you want to be cool when you're fighting. You want to know the mechanics. You want to know how to overcome these enemies, because the character is so capable when you think about it. When you land that killing blow and the fucking whole life bar gets wiped off for the enemy, there's no more satisfying feeling of that accomplishment. And games need to feel rewarding now. They need to feel rewarding. This is how you make short games feel accomplished. A lot of people say, oh, if you're going to pay $60 for a game, it has to be long. That's not true. It has to be deep, engaging, rewarding. It has to feel like the time you spent with it is rewarding. This game does that. It's got beautiful art design. It's got what you expect of Miyazaki's creature design, enemy design. The world's great. It falls in on itself like you expect. The story's a lot more more in your face. It's not as esoteric or cryptic as the Souls games, though it does have lore and it does have stuff you have to read into. But the main story is pretty straightforward. The stuff with the stamina bar is gone now. Swings don't take stamina, so they have refined this combat in other regards, but it doesn't make it any less punishing. It actually makes it a joy to play. This is one of those games where you want to come back to it more after you die than say the other games. Sometimes you can lose a really great run in Dark Souls and it fucking crushes you. In this, you're right back into it. You've learned everything, how to deal with everything along the way. Now it's just you and this boss that's in your way. It becomes a triviality almost, and I never felt that with any other one of his games. In Bloodborne, you backtracking and encountering the hunters that get in your way. It just became a fucking chore sometimes. In this, you're just mowing through enemies. It gives you that power fantasy thing. But then it goes, look at what you've learned along the way. Don't forget that shit, because you're gonna need all of that. And the way it does that is fucking amazing. It's a central game. Go check it out. Don't let the difficulty put you off. If you find yourself dying, you're meant to die. That's part of the learning process. And this is nothing innovative. Old school games are doing this. They punish you for dying, sure, but they want you to learn. And when you break that enemy, there's no feeling like it, fam.
Me. I am the great mighty Pooh, and I'm going to throw my shit at you. A huge supply of tish comes from my chocolate starfish. How about some scat, you little twat? Do you really think you'll survive in here? You don't seem to know which creek you're in. Sweet corn is the only thing that makes it through my rear. How do you think I keep this lovely grin? Now I'm really getting rather mad. You're like a niggly, tickly, shitty little tag nut. When I've knocked you out with all my bab, I'm going to take your head and ram it up my butt.
Your butt?
My butt.
Your butt?
That's right, my butt.
Ugh.
My butt. My butt!
So at least one of you is wondering, why the fuck did you put Conkers Bad Fur Day on here? The footage you're seeing is Conker Live and Reloaded, which is the remake, because it's easy on the eye, because the 64 game isn't really particularly great on the eye, even though it's the definitive and the superior version, because it doesn't have the censorship that the remake re-release had. This is essential because there's gonna come a time, and it's coming, where you won't be able to play these offensive, raunchy, offensive games. We have very few games today that are we've had that are like comedy games made to be fucking hilarious for adult humor, not for kiddie family humor. So, you know, Destroy All Humans has a lot of adult humor. South Park games notoriously have a lot of adult humor, but that's inherent in the IP, so an adaptation of that would have to have that. But in terms of original content made to be raunchy and offensive and crass, right, we don't get that. So Destroy All Humans we had Conkers Bad Fur Day, we have the Leisure Suit Larry games, which people don't even fucking review anymore because I think they find it too offensive, right? But Conker was a time which is completely unprecedented for a fucking, it would be like Naughty Dog going from making Uncharted to a really offensive, crass, rude platformer. It was like that. Rare were like the studio in their day, fam. They had a great relation with Nintendo. They made Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, all these Killer Instinct, all these great games. But they decided we want to subvert this cutesy image. It's a British team, right? It's got that British sense of humor, completely unapologetic. And games like Shadow of the Damned, which is a great example of a Japanese game, which is really fucking offensive. It got delisted from Xbox recently. They don't sell it digitally on PlayStation Store, and I doubt they're gonna provide it on PS Now on there, because I think Sony are clamping down on the kind of nudity, crass, humor, that kind of thing, and censorship now. Xbox were the last bastion for like those games, but even freaking Shadow of the Dam got delisted recently. So eventually games like these will be like, you know what, we don't want this. We don't really want to align ourselves with this, and they might get delisted digitally, and it'll be harder to get these games physically. So for that reason, this game is an essential game. But I'm not just saying it's essential because it's you know, it's gonna get censored, it's gonna get delisted, shit like that. That's one reason. The reason is it has the fucking rare DNA in terms of gaming, platforming, level design, character design, great pacing. It's got all of that, everything you expect from the best of what Rare ever did. It's clearly, there's vision behind it. You know, it's stupid to say vision behind the game, which is all full of like shit jokes and sex jokes and crass, rude humor and pop culture references. It's full of pop culture references, but it's not made or broken by those. It has good pop culture references. It makes references to movies that will hold up, like Kubrick films and The Matrix and shit like that, and The Godfather, like movies that today are still revered, right? Are iconic movies. So it holds up. There's not a lot of people use humor in games that never fucking hold up. They're dated when you play them, but these are never dated because these films are iconic. So it's got those film references, and they use those films to give each stage or chapter a flavor or a genre, and then they create the kind of scenarios and the gameplay stuff around that. So one section involves you fucking rolling a pile of shit up a fucking hill. Another one involves you trying to get a bee, a fucking drunk bumblebee, hooked up with a big-breasted fucking sunflower, so that once she's all like lively and perky, you can use her breast to bounce up to the another level. It's some really crude and raunchy. It's got Saving Private Ryan third-person shooting segments. It's got fucking like platforming segments like you expect. It's just insane. It's just really fucking insane, and it never outstays its welcome. It's a very lean game. It's a great stream game as well. Very few games you can say single player games are great stream games, but when you find that one game that is a joy for people to watch, but it's also a joy to play and fuck up, because it still has its problems. Its jankiness actually is part of its charm, because it's such a fucking hilarious game that you having to redo these sections just creates more laughs for people just joining the stream. Enjoy it while you have it, man. Enjoy it while you have it, because I keep saying that the whole thing about digital marketplaces and digital games is they can pull the rug out under you, and you've seen that. You've fucking seen games get delisted. This is why I believe in physical games, like physical games that you can always have it, put it into your console and play it. You don't have to worry about trying to get hold of it digitally, right? And there's so few offensive games out there, man, that you're just like, what the fuck, how did they get away with this? This game is from another time, another place, another fucking era. They wouldn't bankroll an original title like this and create a game that looks like this and not want the revenue potential, you know, for the kiddies. You know what I mean? You won't make a game that looks clearly marketed towards kids and be like, you know, it's not really for kids, it's really for adults. It's got adult humor, it's got really fucking deep cut Kubrick references, fucking Eyes Wide Shut. You know, like it's crazy. You should go play it. It's a joy. It's a fucking joy. I've played it back in the day, live and reloaded. I saw one of my friends replay the N64 version. Either version's fine. If you can only get hold of Live and Reloaded on Xbox One via backwards compatibility, do that version. It's good enough. It's good enough. It doesn't fundamentally, you know, strip away parts of the game that, you know, completely transform it into something else or a lesser experience. In fact, it improves it in many ways. The platforming, the shooting, the third person shooting is much improved. Either version's great. Go check it out, man. It's a fucking hoot, fam. So the original Final Fantasy VII Essential, why? You know what, fuck it. The world doesn't need yet another emphatic thesis about why fucking FF7 is so great. Why the fuck else do you think they fucking remade it? Go play it.
I think the government made the plague on purpose to get rid of the population growth. Number one, in 1945, corporations paid 50% of federal taxes. Now they pay about 5%. Number two, in 1900, 90% of Americans were self-employed. Now it's about 2%. The entire executive branch is hand-picked. 19 of the last 23 U.S. presidents have been members of the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is financed by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. Did you ever ask what it's for? The surveillance, the police, the shoot-on-sight laws. Is that freedom? The more of us you kill, the more that secessionism lives in the hearts of the people. Ever wonder why big car companies pay 2% tax while the guys on the assembly line pay 40%? Corporations are so big you don't even know who you're working for. That's terror. Terror built into the system.
Need I remind you that in the case of a national emergency, FEMA has a list of 6 million Americans who will be transported to detention centers? Your tabloids call it RX-84.
Yeah, including the President, Congress, and the Supreme Court.
In my position, I find it very easy to add names to that list.
The whole project of world government, going back to the League of Nations, has been funded and manipulated mainly by wealthy bankers. Remember that the UN itself was built on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. The wealthy have always been the ones to profit from one world government. The United Nations' secret goal... Well, this is David Rockefeller's description from a half a century ago. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers.
Everything's so compartmentalized.
So you might have heard me throw around the term immersive sim throughout this part. Immersive sims are basically games where the developer creates rules and parameters and allows you to create freedom with intuitive solutions within those rules and parameters. You're able to do what you logically think you might be able to do given the tools. So if there's a broken glass on the floor, logic dictates that if you walk over the glass you'd make more noise than if you didn't. And immersive sims like Thief support that logic. In many games, cups and glasses are like set dressing that you can like rudimentarily pick up and throw like to cause distractions. But let's say you have a sticky mine, right, that can attach to walls and on the ground but not throw. Your intuition might dictate, right, that perhaps you could stick the mine to the glass and then throw the glass. Games like Dishonored support that. This genre of immersive sims all began with Thief and this game, Deus Ex. Immersive sims are some of like the hardest games to create because you're giving players the choice to break the game, invent solutions that the developer might not have thought about. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Deus Ex is its speculative fiction, which I fucking love. If you imagine that all the pre-turn of the millennium conspiracy theories were true, like black helicopters, grey men, men in black, chimera hybrid testing, RFID chips, depopulation viruses, the Illuminati. Now put that all in one game and you get Deus Ex. You play the MC called JC Denton, which is a play on Jesus Christ, like a Deus Ex Machina, right? Sending Jesus Christ to fix everything, right? Working for an anti-terrorist task force set up by the United Nations, which is really just a front for a splinter group within the Illuminati. A virus called the Grey Death has been used to depopulate the planet, and the elite regulate the distribution of the vaccine and cure, and it's called ambrosia, and they distribute to their own scientists, elites, politicians, that kind of thing. So it hits a little close to home even now. So the so-called terrorist activity has increased in response to this inequality, and you're tasked with clamping down on it. Without going too much into it, you get involved in a giant conspiracy alongside your brother, Paul Denton, and what choices you make, whether you play it lethally or non-lethally, determines the outcome of the story. This game you know probably by reputation, but it's essential and holds up today because of its deep, thoughtful and interconnected systems. The visuals may be dated, but its mechanics are way ahead of their time. Games like Zelda Breath of the Wild now were praised for incorporating immersive sim aspects, but developers like Ion Storm and Looking Glass Studio were making games like this 20 years ago. Go check this game out on PlayStation 2 Classics, on PlayStation 3 and PC.
The humans of Serra knew the illusion of peace. Until Emergence Day. In time, their valiant defense was crushed, with billions dead. Humans denied their enemy control by destroying their own civilization. Now, the long struggle against overwhelming odds approaches a final, desperate stab.
Gears of War 1 is pretty special to me because it was the franchise that got me into the Xbox ecosystem. We all remember, at least those of us old enough to remember, the Mad World trailer for Gears of War and how blown away we were, and we were like, dude, are these really the graphics for Gears of War? This was at a time where we were easily wowed by next-gen graphics. I feel like now the wow factor is kind of not there. It's more about frame rates and resolutions and SSD and lower loading speeds. But back then, the jumps that were being made were fucking astounding. We saw that trailer and we were like, wow, we need to play this game. And I think Gears of War got loads of people into the Xbox 360 ecosystem, and that's why Xbox 360 was so strong on release, why it thrived. And that aside, like the kind of wow factor aside, I think what Gears of War contributed to the cover-based shooter can't be understated. It still has some of the tightest fucking cover-based third-person shooting gameplay ever. A lot of these Sony fucking games now have floaty cover, have physics going on. Oh, I'm touching the wall, and and when I get close to the wall, I'm touching it. But you're in and out of cover, you're breaking cover. It's improved a lot since. The snappiness of Gears of War cover has informed so much as what came later. Even people from, take Shinji Mikami, who made Vanquish, he learned a lot about snappy cover mechanics in third-person shooters from the success of Gears and how popular it was and how tight it was. And the narrative's pretty simple. It's actually quite deep. It looks like a dude bro shooter, like a Michael Bay movie. With 4 fucking dudes just fucking about, destroying things, gore, porn all over the place, that kind of thing. But the lore and the story is actually really good. So you're part of the COG army. You, Marcus, Dominic, Baird, and Coltrane, baby, are part of the coalition of ordered governments, which, in a world where everyone's fighting for resources, you were established as a faction to keep order, right? In a world that was in turmoil, and the whole backstory is you were fighting over resources. But then D-Day happened, and locusts, these aliens, started coming out from under the ground, not from space, but from under the ground, and they kind of jammed up the works when it came to extracting resources and shit like that. So in a way, it kind of united the world behind this common enemy. The story is fun. It's got a very B-movie sort of like darkly humorous, like you say, like a Michael Bay film, and I feel like it's never been the same. As much as I hate Cliff Bleszinski, the guy who created this series and this franchise, I miss the whole B-movie, over the top, fucking just dude bro kind of humor, and it's kind of lost that. It's kind of lost its humor, lost its edge since. So Gears of War 1, this is the footage of the remastered version. They actually decided to remaster. It looks fucking dope. If you guys remember the original Gears of War 1 on 360, it looks like a very old Unreal Engine game. But I think the Coalition, this new studio that took charge of the franchise after Epic parted ways, and obviously Microsoft kept the franchise because it was their franchise, right? It was a second party relationship. It's a game that still holds up. It's a very lean, mission-based game. The combat scenarios are great. The skirmish aspect of it is what was best. These little skirmishes where you're fighting against smaller groups of things. Later on, the game became wide, big enemies, giant set pieces, spectacle. But Gears of War 1, with a singular focus on these 4 buddies, part of COG was fucking awesome. It had some great twists and turns. At least the first trilogy was fucking amazing, and it had snappy combat. It had a great multiplayer. Very few times you see a single player game take what's great about the single player mechanic and translate to a multiplayer mode. Usually they don't really fucking work. Even like Last of Us, its multiplayer was tweaked and very, very different. Like the core fundamental combat was there, but what they had you doing and all that stuff was much different. It was like a virus mode or whatever it was. And I feel like everything great about the story, they translated to it. The gore, the animations, nothing was stripped back or held back for the sake of a whole bunch of people being on screen. In fact, Halo is one of those things where the story is not as important or wasn't as memorable as the multiplayer, but Gears of War's multiplayer and Gears of War campaign, they went hand in hand. It was the complete package. Nobody cares about the COD campaigns no more when you think about it. They say they do, but they don't really. It's all about the multiplayer. Halo, it's really all about the multiplayer. It's like the campaign seemed to be an afterthought, but with Gears, you knew when you bought this game it was the complete package. What this contributed to cover-based mechanics and shooters makes it fucking essential. It still holds up and is actually in many ways still better than a lot of the cover mechanics we get today. I still find myself playing games where I feel like, what is this stupid cover? Mass Effect 3, I'm pretty sure, came out well after Gears of War 1 came, and it's using the same Unreal Engine, but the cover was so fucking weird. Like for Mass Effect 2 and even 3, and I was like, dude, no, they're not getting it. You're using the same engine, but you don't have the same creative team behind it who created this snappy cover-based system, and you never felt like you were snapped to cover, but you never felt like you was fucking stuck to that cover. And it still is one of the best cover-based shooters ever. It's just a whole ton of fun. It's cathartic with this violence. It was so refreshing in its time. You know what I mean? Like, it is a joke, right? The Xbox Live community was just a bunch of fucking 14, 15-year-old dude bros who were toxically masculine, impressed by that. And yeah, that contributed a lot to why Gears of War was so successful. But you go and play it, and you play, and you engage with the mechanics and the cover system and the shooting and the how punchy the weapons felt, and the whole active reload where you got more bang for your buck out of your ammo when you timed your button presses. Like I say, a parry mechanic, a timed button press mechanic makes everything instantly deeper. You know, in the middle of a hectic combat, it can turn the tides completely, and they had that, and it just had the secret sauce, man. So go fucking play it. It's amazing. It's fucking hilarious. And quick trivia, Michael B. Jordan was a character in the third game. He did voice acting and motion capture for character in the third game. So this dude, there was a time where this franchise was at its peak, and now it's kind of lost its way, even though I think it's coming back. 5 wasn't too bad, but go check it out, man. Control Ultimate Edition, it's basically a definitive edition of Control, but the vanilla game is just as good. But I suggest Control Ultimate Edition. This might be the most recent game on my list. No, actually, tell a lie. There is one more game which is more recent, but I don't want to give it away. This is such a fucking revelation. I love that word. It's a revelation of a game. I mean, we've seen it coming, because this game is by Remedy, the studio that made the Max Payne games, Max Payne 1 and 2. They made Alan Wake on Xbox 360. Those of you familiar, those stands who are familiar with Alan Wake greatness. And they also made Quantum Break, which was a Xbox One, kind of early mid-gen Xbox One game. Really great game. didn't do as well as Alan Wake or Max Payne, but it was still decent. And everything they've done in their game, those games, this is in every sense of the word is the culmination. Like, and you see that in the game. You see the Max Payne frenetic combat in there, the speedy, almost bullet time-esque stuff that they did in the Max Payne games. You see a lot of the sort of esoteric storytelling from those games. You see the mystery aspects and the cinematics of the Alan Wake games in there. You see some of the more science to explain the supernatural elements from the Quantum Break series, and some of the more time bendy, reality bendy sort of stuff from that game. And this for me is their best game they've ever made. It's I'm not even going to bother trying to explain the story to you, because the thing with this game is the more you dig deep into it, the more you'll get out of the story. If you don't care about the story, by the time you're finished, you won't know what the story even is. It's that kind of a game that requires you be engaged and observant, and it requires that you actually care about what's going on in the game. So you could play this game straight through as a sort of semi-linear third-person action game with sort of Metroidvania aspects, where you open a door here, beat a boss, beat an enemy there, press a switch, go back here, do that. There is a rudimentary story there that will keep you hooked, but I think to get the most out of this game really requires you dig deep into this fascinating location called the Oldest House. The basic setup of the story is, I won't bother going on and on about what the story is. This girl called Jessie Faden, something happened to her really traumatic in her past, where her and her brother found some object, some device, and some supernatural event occurred, and this organization called the FBC, Federal Bureau of Control, they're like the Men in Black who come in, give you fucking amnesia because you've seen something you shouldn't have. You're a civilian. They came and took her brother away, and she's been searching for him ever since, and she's trying to find this organization, the FBC, and she actually manages to find this NBC and stroll in. But on the moment she gets there, she finds out that the director of this organization has fucking killed himself. He's dead, and his service weapon, which is, I'm not even gonna go into it. I couldn't. A 2-hour video would not be enough to tell you the story. She gets hold of this gun, this service weapon of the director of this bureau, and she becomes the new director. And it's just bizarre and twisted. So some of the cinematic, some of the narrative influences are obvious if you really get into this game. Are David Lynch films, Twin Peaks is a definite inspiration for this. Mr. Robot is a definite inspiration for this. X-Files is a definite inspiration for this. So if you like those, if you like the sound of those, then you're gonna love this game. It's got some of the best audio logs, collectibles, text logs I've ever played in a game. You're basically, it's almost like satirical in a way. It's a very serious game, with serious, very psychological, but in a very way it's satire about bureaucracy and working in a company and chain of command and the mundanity of that, and about whether or not and with all this supernatural shit going on, which has completely upended this very desk, pencil pushing, desk based bureau. It tells a story out of that. So I can't describe it. It's not esoteric. Some people say they don't know what the story is, and they're not sure there's a definitive way to say that, yeah, this is what the story there is. It's all there. Anyone who's played it knows that everything is answered, everything is grounded in some sort of explanation, and it follows its rule and it sticks to its rules, and it's really, really fascinating. But this is one of the locations, one of the most iconic locations I've ever, which is ironic I use the word iconic, because this game deals with icons and archetypes, and about humanity giving power to things, like, and giving them iconic status. like an anchor. And when we say anchor, there is a particular design for an anchor that we think of, right? It's the Popeye anchor, the tattoo that Popeye has, anchor. And because it's embedded in our mind, it's iconic, right? We give it power, and through these objects of power, it opens up a kind of a tear in reality, which allows the antagonistic force in this game, the hiss, to come through. It's very supernatural and science, and you can already tell by the way I'm talking about it, it's just very deep and it's amazing. But that aside, on a very simple level, the combat is so tight. You never feel like, you know, mutants like Jean Grey about levitation and telekinesis and all this stuff. It's weird because this deserves to actually fit into the same category as Spider-Man or PS4 or Batman, where it makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel like with someone with telekinesis or telepathic powers, you know, to control enemies, that kind of thing. It makes you feel like that, and it feels really punchy, and it feels perfect, the fucking controls. It's such a tight game. It was made on a low budget, but it looks the part. This game was like a next-gen game that came out last gen. I mean, if you go look at Digital Foundry videos, and it's a fucking, like, I can't describe it. It's an essential game because you know that it's taken stuff from games, you know, particularly their own games, Remedy's own games, but it's a combination of things that have come together where you think that this could have been just a tech demo, just a vertical slice, and they made a game out of it. They really like created a fascinating world to explore. So there was, and it constantly shifts as you move throughout the thing, so it's never the same. So it might sound like a roguelike. That was the apprehension I had before I even got this game. I thought it was going to be a fucking roguelike where no one run was the same, and you go almost like a Returnal. If you guys hate Returnal and you guys just fucking thought you wasted $60 on Returnal, this is the game for you. There's a story. It's more like a Metroidvania. It's not procedurally generated, and you're never hitting your head against a wall. You know, you're making progression. You can upgrade her. You know, there's no RNG to this game. So if you hate Returnal and you wish you could love Returnal, play this. This is one of the best games, man. I just can't. It's not the kind of game you can describe. But if you really like tight third-person combat, you want your games to look as amazing as they can possibly look on your fucking rigs, your PC, your rigs. You want to fucking flex the RTX on your 3080, your 3090, whatever it is, right? You want a great gameplay. You want a meaty story that rewards you for the more you delve into it. This is the fucking game. It's so fucking good. And you know what my problem is? They were giving this away free on fucking GOG, goodoldgames.com. They were giving this away free, and people were still like, I'll wait for it's not the ultimate edition. I'll wait. People are making excuses not to play this game, even though they've had nothing but praise for this game. Nothing but fucking praise for this game. It's an essential game. It's a jack of all trades, which actually is more than the sum of its parts. The combat's amazing. I hate to use subversion, but it subverts everything you expect out of games of this type. It's very heady, very cerebral, very heady. Requires your participation. You can't just be a passive observer, especially when it comes to the story. But it makes you feel very powerful. It's got a great nuanced protagonist, right? And they never beat you over the head with the strong female empowered woman thing. It does it perfectly, and she's such a great character. She's not one of my favorite characters of all time, but she is the perfect character for this sort of game. So it's all of that, Mr. Robot, David Lynch mashed together, X-Files, all that shit mashed together with some really crazy sci-fi supernatural shit going on, man. Go fucking check it out now, fam. It's free on Good Old Games, fam. Go check it out.
Indications of Metatron. It's way too shallow.
The Metatron is not very deep.
And it's very strong. It wasn't here last time I came. What the hell is that? An orbital frame. My liver's damaged. Damn Baram.
Baram from Mars? Dingo!
Good morning. Ready for combat? This is Detached Backup Battle Unit, Ada. Do you request control instructions?
But in the last half year, the situation on Mars has changed drastically. Now, Bahram's war potential is very strong. The Space Force put up a stubborn resistance, but without a major war, Mars was occupied by Bahram in a flash. Alman is already getting ready. Only those two machines can make Alman move or stop.
So you want this frame, don't you?
Maybe.
Even if you're Baram, that's too rough.
It sure is.
Who's the commander?
Is that you, Viola?
Is programmed to blow up at the core of Alman. In case of need, Ada will start up the explosion system automatically. It's programmed to do so.
Ada, please answer my question. You're going to Alman, aren't you?
So what if I am?
Do you know Ada intends to self-destruct Jackie on Alman?
So you'll find a lot of similarities, actually, if you're familiar with Gundam War in Pocket, a lot of similarities between Zone of the Enders 1, the first game, in this duology, I would say. And I feel like what the game on this list is actually Zone of the Enders' second runner, the sequel, the second game. But I do like the story of the first game because it's a very simple story, even though the combat and the gameplay isn't something to really compliment because it's very basic. It's a very basic game. It felt more like a tech demo than anything, right? And it's the story, the fiction of the thing is very generic. The usual, we colonize Mars, Mars becomes a breakaway civilization, it's Earth versus Mars, fighting over resources, fighting back and forth. The whole setup it has its own twist, but it generally speaking, it's not the fiction that's important, it's the vision, the way they realize that fiction visually, right? So this is a third-person hack and slash action game slash bullet hell slash Panzer Dragoon type game. It's obviously it's very much in the DNA of, you know, Japanese games, and even though I like the first game, it's the second game and the way it created this frenetic action, this mecha, and there had to be one mecha game in this list because I feel like the mecha games, most of them are in Japan. They don't make it over here because Gundam's used in Japan. Mecha is huge in Japan. I don't feel like these games are profitable here because mecha are not as big. Obviously the anime weebs will tell you it is, but this for me is the best mecha game I've played in my lifetime, and it's frenetic, it's fast paced, the feeling of empowerment of being in a mecha, I think it replicates that a lot. It's not particularly an ambitious game. The bland backgrounds, very simplistic looking designs, but the focus is squarely on the mecha of combat, right? And it's very stylized. So stylized is the name of the game when it comes to this. Don't expect it to be dense and have character models. The whole game is spent in the orbital frame, the name of the mecha. And you go from mission to mission fighting. The only time you ever see the pilots is in anime cutscenes or little kind of character portraits when they're talking back and forth. And the kind of density and the amount of crazy shit going on the screen was amazing, but amongst that chaos, there was method to the madness. It looked like a button masher. It looked like just mashing X and locking on and attacking. It wasn't. You got to make sure your enemies were as maneuverable as you, if not more so. They could do more damage to you. It was a difficult game. You would take punishment. So they made you feel powerful in this fast JOT, right? This mech, but you had to constantly zip around. It's like it was basically like a battle between Saiyans, but in a mech. And for that, it just was such a fucking joy to play. It's one of those games you could complete in one sitting, and it's really very rare for me to have a game where I felt I'm gonna sit here and just finish this game. Just keep playing it. And the cutscenes and anime cutscenes were nice, because obviously there was a big improvement from the first game that really didn't keep you engaged, if not for the interaction between Ada, the AI within JOT, and this boy that I just stumbled upon. Like, it saved his life, and I felt that intimate connection between the little boy and the Ada kept me going a lot more. In this, the production value's kind of gone up. They had people animate the cutscenes, so it's like you're watching a mecha anime, and you're playing the fights between it. But more than anything, I felt the art design, the vision, and the designs for the orbital frames were some of the best mecha designs I've ever seen. For me, it beats Gundam mecha design, Robotech mecha designs. It beats any mecha design I've seen, whether I remember the name of what the franchise was or wasn't. It brought the best of bullet hell stuff, the bullet hell stuff that Japan does amazingly. It brought the best of that. It brought the best of games like Panzer Dragoon, and it brought the best of the third-person hack and slash action games like the Devil May Cry's and that kind of thing. And it gave you a small set of moves, but asked you to use them wisely. You asked you to use them carefully, and you had to make sure you didn't commit to something unless you know you want to do damage, because you leave yourself open. So it created rules and parameters and that kind of thing, even with such a limited combat palette. And there's nothing, I just can't describe it. This is a game you play, you can't describe why it's good. It's the feeling of playing it. This is something Japan does amazingly. Really responsive, tight combat, solid frame rate. I think we took it for granted. We take for granted now just how fucking ambitious these games were for creating fast, frenetic, solid games with great frame rates. Because frame rates, we never really cared about frame rates till we started noticing that, look man, we've got amazingly powerful hardware. Why are games still running like this? So for games to run this amazingly back then, credit where credit is due. It was really ambitious, and Kojima often gets credited for this game. He's not the director of this game. A lot of people like to throw, Kojima, man's on at the end, is man's on. I'm like, he's got nothing to do with it. He's not the director of the game. He had a say in it for sure. He had some creative influence. But really, I feel like the person that deserves credit is the director of the game, and Yoji Shinkawa, for his unique vision, for this mecha universe. And the bosses were fucking amazing. That's some of my favorite bosses ever. It feels like you come down to the wire with some of these bosses. I remember the first boss fight with Vic Viper, and I won't spoil it because there is one big early spoiler I could make for this game, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's a boss battle with Vic Viper, and that was such a fucking tense and hectic battle, man. I've never felt my heart beat as fast in a boss fight ever. This has got some of my favorite boss fights in any video game franchise ever. So for that reason, it's unique. It's a very underrepresented genre in the West. So if you want to play something, why not play the best? Go check out Zone of the Enders Second Runner. You can play this on PlayStation 3. I would suggest the HD collection, Zone of the Enders HD collection with 1 and 2, just this continuity, or you can play the Mars edition, the PlayStation 4 Mars edition of Zone of the Enders Second Runner. Go check it out. I think you guys will love this game. You'll love it.